I'm Andy Stack. I'm currently Vice Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Our chair is virtual tonight, so I will be conducting the meeting. Please, I want to remind everyone that our meeting is live streamed, and you can find our agenda in the background materials on the CA Board of Directors webpage. If you're virtual, I just ask you to mute your microphone until you're speaking. As we move through the meeting, I will introduce each item on the agenda, and before a vote is taken, I will try to restate the motion to make sure we all know what we're voting on. And I'd say for the board members, if you do have any problem hearing me or any other member, please let us know as soon as possible so we can then try to adjust. And tonight's timekeeper is Karen. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your volunteering. Okay, I'll now call the row. Keith?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Sky?
Here.
Karen?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Alan?
Here, but not there.
Dennis?
Here.
Chris? Chris is joining us later. Reg? Hopefully he'll join us later.
Reg isn't going to be here.
Reg is not going to be here?
No.
Okay. And Andy Stack, he's here. I have a few closed meetings to announce. The CA Board of Directors held a closed meeting at CA headquarters on March 28th, 6:03 p.m. Board members present were Sky, Reg, Karen, Eric, Alan, Keith, and Andy. Vote to close was 7-0-0. It was closed under Maryland Homeowners Association, 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 4, consultation with the terms or conditions of a business transaction in the negotiation stage if the disclosures could adversely affect the economic interests of the Homeowners Association. The CA Board of Directors held a virtual closed meeting on April 4th at 7:07 p.m. Board members participating were Sky, Reg, Karen, Eric, Alan, Keith, Bill, and Andy. Vote to close the meeting was 7-0-0. It was closed under HOA Section 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 4, consideration of the terms and conditions of a business transaction in the negotiating stage if the disclosure could affect the economic interests of the Homeowners Association. There was a closed meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on April 8th at 1:05 p.m. Committee members were Deb Bach, Carolyn Payton, Carlin Kako, and Eileen McNair. The vote to close was 4-0-0. It was closed under Homeowners Association Act 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, and other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation for other legal matters. The CA Board of Directors held a closed meeting at CA headquarters on April 11th at 6:15 p.m. Board members present were Sky, Reg, Karen, Chris, Eric, Alan, Keith, Bill, and Andy. The vote to close was 8-0-0. The closure was authorized under the HOA Act, 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and 4, consideration of the terms or conditions of a business transaction in the negotiation stage if the disclosure could adversely affect the economic interests of the homeowners. I think that's actually Section 6. The Risk Management Committee held a closed meeting on April 11th at 6:50 p.m. CA headquarters. Committee members were Susan, Dennis, Karen, Reg, and Alan. All Risk Management Committee meetings are closed under the HOA Act, Section 4, consultation with personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, and other persons connected with pending and potential litigation. The April 11th meeting was also closed under Section 3, consultation with legal counsel on legal matters. And that's all I have for closed meetings.
Andy, aren't we also supposed to say the purpose of the closed meetings, not just the legal justification for it?
Yeah, the problem is all I have was what I read. I don't have the actual forms in front of me. But I think that's something we should note for the future. Thanks, Alan. Okay, I'd like to move to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Karen moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Keith moved. Keith seconded. Are there any objections? Sky?
I see that 45 minutes is allotted for the stream restoration assessment. I just have a feeling that's going to take longer.
Yeah, but we'll see how it goes.
And we're talking about resolutions, motions, and proclamations, and I'm wondering if sometime tonight somebody can define the difference for the people listening in who may not know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. So are there any objections to the agenda? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, move on to Columbia update. Dennis?
So before we roll the video, one of the many duties that the open space team members take on this time of year is assessing the condition of the bridges throughout the open space. And there's something like 274 bridges, wooden bridges out in the open space. And you may have noticed that they're starting to look a little bit different. And and that's for good reason, but here to explain why is Steve Boswell.
The bridges are a key component within our pathway system. We do an annual safety inspection. They go through all the structural components of the bridge. The inspection drives the whole entire replacement list. The Columbia Association's in-house crew just completed the installation of this FRP bridge. These bridges actually have a life expectancy of 40 years compared to a wood bridge, which is 10 to 20 years. Some of the features we have on this bridge compared to a wood bridge is the fiberglass decking. It actually has a non-slip surface and also has slots in it which provide additional drainage. Also, safety rails here. Smaller gap at the bottom, so someone's foot doesn't slide in here, stroller wheels, things like that, and then they're spaced accordingly coming up. Additional is this top rail, top cap, has a UV protectant on top of it to protect these flat surfaces from the sun. Our in-house crews install these. It takes about a week for installation to complete. They actually build them on site. Once we have the bridge ordered and we have the correct length, sometimes we do some pathway adjustments to align it better for maintenance and the public usage. Start demo of the old bridge and then start the assembly of the FRP bridge from there. The main benefit of the fiberglass bridge is the longevity, the 40-year lifespan of a bridge compared to 10 or 20 years for a wooden bridge. We're not traveling back and forth replacing as much. We can come in, install an FRP bridge, complete in a week, less emissions, less traveling, less product, less time.
I would say it's remarkable. I used to go out and hear nails being banged and hammers, and now it's like a metal shop. It's the ratcheting, and it's really remarkable. And it's remarkable how quick they do it and how quickly that gets done. CA has a long-standing partnership with the Washington Ice Dogs, a special hockey program that gives individuals with developmental disabilities a chance to participate in the sport. Every year, Tom Connors and the team members at the ice rink host them, and it's just another reflection of how this organization values and supports diversity in the CA space.
The Columbia Association's philosophy is to create safe space and welcoming environment for everyone, everywhere.
It's community building. Hockey really is for everyone. Sports are for everyone. Making developmental disabilities feel part of the community and included is really important.
Once a year, we host the Washington Ice Dogs. We invite them to come on down, and they spend 3 hours a day hosting teams from other areas, and they all come up and just have a wonderful day playing hockey.
There's a lot of value in having our tournament at the Columbia Ice Rink. They always make space for us. Every year, we ask for some time at the end of the season in order to have the local friendly. And the Columbia Ice Rink is always accommodating and always works to make sure that we fit into their time and their schedule.
It's wonderful when people say, we just love it here, and this is like our second home.
They get to belong to something, get to feel part of a team, get to go to school and say, my ice hockey team won their game this weekend. I scored a goal. And hearing that some of their core memories are being part of our team just tells me that we've made a place where they feel like they belong.
So when I see that video, the first thing that comes to mind is what HOA is not like any other. We are so different, and we are in so many spaces. We're wrapping up Earth Month and looking at all the different ways that we move environmental sustainability forward. In this video, you'll hear from MC Carey, an artist that regularly contributes to exhibits at the Columbia Art Center.
I think there's a lot of great practice of sustainability in printmaking. One of my main mediums is linoleum. I've even gotten some linoleum from like reuse stores to carve with it. So that's one way you can like reuse something that was destined for the trash. Carving a block and printing it on shirts and your clothes and stuff can be a really great way to reinvigorate your own style and add your own little flair, especially to a piece that you thought that you were going to throw away. It can help to upcycle and keep things out of landfill. Sustainability looks like, instead of using rolls and rolls of paper towel, I will like use my practice sheets of paper and use that to clean up things, or I'll use my old t-shirt, I'll cut those up and use that to clean up instead of buying like single-use items. Another way to reuse scraps that you were just destined to throw away.
So I previewed the next video, and I couldn't stop smiling. And so this is a TV show spoof of The Sopranos. And, you know, we're supposed to do good things and have fun, and I think this is a great example of that.
Columbia, Maryland, home to over 100,000 people and 3,600 acres of open space. Columbia Association strives to be a community that welcomes diversity, respects the land, and fosters the growth of individuals. A huge part of that mission is environmental stewardship, ensuring our beloved natural resources are here for generations to come. The way Columbia was built provides some unique challenges, and the way our forests are situated allows for non-native invasive species to thrive. They crowd out and displace valuable native plants, ones that are good for Columbia's ecosystem and are a major threat to the open space that we all love and cherish. That's why Columbia Association is making an effort to reduce these impacts and address this serious issue in our open space. While removing these invasives may cause short-term disruptions, our strategy is focused on long-term control. Every day we're working in areas that are heavily infested with invasives and improving the habitat for native plants, animals, and insects. With hundreds of invasives spread across Columbia's open space, there is no time to waste. And it takes all of us to make a difference. Columbia Association is committed to these removal efforts as long as they're needed. But the best thing we can all do is avoid planting these invasives in the first place, and instead opt for native species. That way, the entire community has a role in building a healthier ecosystem for years to come.
I'd like to call out Joe Cipriano, who does the video and also did the voiceover for this. And if you've ever met him,
Was it Joe Attenborough?
yes, you would never know it was him. It is absolutely remarkable. And the last one up is on awards, and this has got so much to do with the type of organization we are and the people that we reach. And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't on our part to go out and just look for awards. These just come in. And I'm going to let Jeremy speak to these. Well,
Shall we start?
yep.
So that was me at the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Conference. This is our Green Community Leadership Award that we received at Greenfest from Howard County, recognizing CA's leadership in protecting Howard County's natural resources. That's Eric Walker talking about invasives, because he is really passionate about that. He was actually in the Joe Attenborough video, sort of continuing with our work promoting sustainability at Greenfest. That's sort of our Super Bowl almost every year. We're there as a standard, sort of continuing to engage the community around stream waders and improving our environment, especially children is sort of a primary focus area of ours as well, because historically that's a tough group to engage with as families and children. We've had really good success with that of late. That guy's super excited about that. Lots of trash pickup. We actually picked up an entire dumpster's worth of trash in less than a day with our team on Earth Day, which is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, and then just to circle back to the Department of Energy Award, the Crystal. So that's really a significant accomplishment for us as an organization. So we were recognized nationally for that. As an organization, we've reduced our energy use by basically a third. So we've cut our energy use by a third, and that doesn't reflect the fact that we've also converted all of our energy to renewable sources, whether it's direct on-site generation or being off-site with wind renewable energy certificates. So we've effectively reduced our carbon footprint by probably 70% as an organization at this point. So we're a well-established leader in climate change mitigation. So that was sort of the recognition we received for that.
And I close by saying, you know, every day we are working hard to make Columbia a better community. And that shows up not only in the awards that Jeremy and his team have gotten, but also Anish in tennis. And I believe also in the much recognized city of Columbia. A big part of that, you know, Howard County does a great job, but we add value everywhere on top of that. And what makes Howard County and Columbia special is CA, and you see it here.
Thanks, Dennis. And Jeremy, I remember when we actually started the sustainability program back in about 2010, 2011, and it's just amazing that it all worked. And we have been able to reduce so much. So it's good work by CA. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a testament to the proprietors of the community and this board. So thank you for enabling us to do it.
Thank you, Dennis. We'll now move on to resident speak out. I have the list here. I will call on the speakers in the order in which they signed up. Individuals have 3 minutes for comments, and then those representing an organization have up to 5 minutes. And then following the remarks, you know, board members do have an opportunity to ask questions, but you know, make sure when you ask the question, you turn your mic on and then turn it off after your question is done.
Except you, Andy, or the rest of us.
All of us, except I'm having a problem reaching, so I gotta redo things here. Okay, first up, we have Bob Dover. Welcome, Bob.
Hello, folks. So I have some observations on this evening's presentation on the Longfellow Stream Restoration Project. The first half of the PowerPoint presentation is really just general talk about watershed plans and regulatory structure. All of that's really irrelevant to the question of whether the project's been successful or not. As for the second half of the presentation, I'm glad to see that CA has hired a contractor to perform field surveys. Actual quantitative survey and sampling data is the only thing we should be looking at, so it'll be good to see that presentation. Here's my observations on actual data from a stack of documents I've acquired. First, for Longfellow, there's no water quality or ecological survey data on the project. This is because this type of monitoring is simply not required. However, that didn't stop the contractor from claiming in the year 3 report, the contractor reported that the project area is now quote unquote self-sustaining. How can it be self-sustaining if you have to go out every few years and replant the trees? Finally, the year 3 report and the second half of tonight's presentation document numerous issues with invasive plants. CA's staff has known about the reforestation failure and the invasive plants for more than a year now. Somehow, these issues were never mentioned when the staff and WAC were trying so hard last summer to convince you to do the Elkhorn Branch project, which would have deforested an area 6 times the size of Longfellow. This is a common pattern. When these projects are proposed, we're told that the impacts will be minor and temporary, and the project area will recover quickly. Then when we're well into year 4, like we are with Longfellow, and still struggling to get trees to grow, we're told that we always knew, that the reforestation would take decades. Also, in the same report where they document the 36% survival rate, the contract asked the Army Corps to be excused from any more monitoring, the year 5 monitoring. The project's on CA land that cut down 10 acres of trees in a residential neighborhood. You're having difficulty revegetating that area, yet the contractor wants to wave goodbye and walk away. Has CA taken a position on this? Have you insisted that the contractor remain responsible until the area is reforested? Are you protecting the land and the home values of your residents, or aren't you? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions? Andy. Sky.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. You've talked quite a bit about the negative aspects of the project. Do you have an alternative in mind that should have been done rather than just letting nature take over?
It depends what your goal is. If your goal is truly water quality improvement and ecological improvement, the data says that's not going to happen and you should just let it recover naturally. If your goal is, as I believe it's been claimed, stabilization of stream banks, or erosion and dredging, then the answer is to do surgical projects, to do local stabilization. Don't try to control that through hydrology. Try to control it with engineered structures. If your goal is to generate mitigation credits for real estate developers, then I have no opinion on that. That's obviously a completely different thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Bob. Next up, we have Sue Bannister. Sue, are you with us?
Sue can't make it tonight. She has laryngitis.
Oh.
So she'll be in next time, I think.
Okay. Next up, we have Joel Horowitz. Joel, I see you online. Welcome.
Hi. Nice, Andy. You got to chair your last meeting, apparently. So enjoy your Thursdays. Joel Hurwitz, speaking for myself tonight. Apparently still have the policy that if I ask questions, I should get an answer. So since I've been politely ignored on what I'm going to talk about in the past, I'm going to call this the Resident Speak Out Jeopardy Edition. The Articles of Incorporation of the Villages generally say that the Columbia Council is in turn being entitled to nominate from among its members, then the members meeting of the board. So why do you believe that the Columbia Council should not first meet to nominate members prior to the appointment to the Columbia Association Board? There appears to be no written requirement that the council conduct a pro forma meeting of approving the agenda and electing a chair and a vice chair in the minutes, for which you never do anything. So why do you not believe the Columbia Council should not authorize the Association Board to archive the old and outdated policies of the Columbia Council, which are now considered policies of the Columbia Association? The operational policy for voting in Columbia Village elections says that Columbia Association owns land in each village and therefore entitled to cast votes in the Columbia Community Association election for the Columbia Association representative seats. I previously shared that the covenants of Harper's Choice, Oakland Mills, and Wild Lake exclude CPR land from the definition of lot. So why do you believe you're entitled to vote in these three villages? I previously shared that the covenants of Dorsey, Surge, Kingston Trivens, and River Hill exclude definition of lot any plots of land designated as open space or common access areas. So why do you believe you're entitled to vote in those three villages? Moreover, voting rights in River Hill and Kingston Trivens give voting only to 18-year-old residents, not lot owners. Last year, the acting president sent a letter to the River Hill attempting to exercise CA's votes. The acting president was told that CA did not have a right to vote. Apparently, an argument ensued on this issue. I also spoke to the board about this. Yet, once again, the acting president attempted this month to exercise CA's votes in River Hill. Why does CA believe it is your vote River Hill? Why did you not vote in Kingston Trivens? Why is Kingston Trivens different from River Hill? The operational policy in the third sentence says to avoid actual or perceived conflicts of interest, the Columbia Association adopted the following policies for each village in which association can cast votes. What is the meaning of for each village in which association can cast votes? It's time you added this to deal with River Hill. So again, why did you vote in River Hill? Item 2 says that you should cast votes in each village where election is taking place that year. Again, why did you not cast a vote in Kingston Trivens but in River Hill? In which villages did CA cast its votes? And what does the operational policy for voting in Columbia Association elections mean for each of the 10 villages?
Joel?
You can listen to the tape and give me some answers to those.
Hey, Joel, your time is up.
Thank you, Joel. Are there any questions for Joel? Let me just check here real quick with Eric. No. Thank you, Joel. Move on next to Richard Bannister. I think, yep. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking tonight in reference to the Longfellow Stream Restoration Update being presented later tonight. On page 12, the conclusions and recommendations include the understatement of the decade when it comes to so-called stream restorations in Columbia. And it pretty much sums up why woodland stream engineering should not be conducted. To quote, multi-story canopy shading would be helpful. Would be helpful? It is essential. It's essential. It's the only reliable, non-labor intensive, non-chemical means of control. The photos on page 4 of the report illustrate the difference between a multi-story canopy and zero tree cover. In the left panel, we can see native skunk cabbage, which actually indicates there was an active floodplain before the project, as they only grow naturally in boggy areas. And on the right is Japanese stiltgrass at its height in late summer. On page 7, we see John McCoy, who as watershed manager presumably oversaw this project, standing in waist high in Japanese stiltgrass in Longfellow. Page 8 contains 2 more photos also showing mature Japanese stiltgrass. The plant survey also contains recommendations as to how to control stiltgrass. To quote, hand weeding is probably best. Time is critical as late as possible in season, but before seeding. Question, what is the time frame? When should hand weeding begin and end? It also adds that hand weeding is, quote, labor intensive, 10 acres. Question, how intensive? How many labor hours would it take to weed the entire Longfellow project area? And remember, the invasives are going to be increasing in adjacent undisturbed but now sunlit areas also, and will come back for years to come from dormant seeds. Also, who is responsible for the weeding? Ecotone, SHA, CA? Quote, focused and selective use of herbicides, very limited only. Question, are there any pesticides that will control Japanese stiltgrass that are safe for aquatic life, the site being either side of a freshwater stream in a floodplain, and won't kill adjacent plants? Longfellow was bulldozed in the construction period, presumably eliminating all plant life in the disturbed area. This would have been a blank canvas on which to plant only natives. From the report, we can see that in 3 years, roughly 25% of plants are now non-native and cover over 50% of the terrain. Question, will CA be conducting yearly plant surveys so we can see what the trend is? Also, I'd like to add that leafy tree canopies, while providing shade to control stiltgrass, also provide leaf litter in the fall that becomes a mulch that smothers germinating stiltgrass seeds. Yes, a multi-story tree canopy would be helpful, like how it was before this project was put forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Just check real quick. No, don't see any questions. Thank you, Richard. Next up, we have Sharon Boyce. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Be talking about the presentation. Good evening, board members, and thanks once again for this opportunity. While I was checking out the $17 million settlement over control of the development of the lakefront that revealed some interesting relationships, I came across the registered lobbyists for Howard County from 2019 through 2022. They're listed in an article on the Howard County Watchdog's website. I also discovered a lobbyist for a stream restoration contractor. I guess it shouldn't have surprised me. After all, stream restorations have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Although I'm very interested to hear the update on the Longfellow Stream project, I want to note that Tetra Tech works directly with the stream restoration industry. What we need is an independent group of scientific advisors with no financial ties to the industry to be brought in as well. We were told this project would provide improvements to the bay's water quality, our stream, and our flourishing mature forest. This would reduce the need for dredging of the neighborhood sediment catch pond, and the work would be done for free. But let's be honest, our stream didn't need a restoration. This project was for credits, and tonight I want to hear about how many and what type of credits were produced for the SHA from the loss of our natural resources. Slide 3 lists some aims for these projects, but with no baseline testing or monitoring for any true length of time or erosion bank pins installed, there is zero proof that this project has achieved these aims, and visual observations have shown that the project has failed. The contractor made money from a side effect of stormwater runoff. They didn't stop pollution or cure anything. They needed to address the polluted runoff where it's occurring. That's what stops erosion. That's what improves water quality. Trees in the stream are a good thing, or why would the contractor have added them back in? New England restores streams by adding trees into them. It's like we're being asked to forget what a healthy stream even is or does. Streams are not stormwater conveyance facilities. The current stream restoration crediting guide lists 13 negative known consequences of stream restorations. We have 12 of the 13, plus one not listed, sideways flooding, and it's bad. I keep asking you, what if we get a hurricane? Our stream banks kept us safe from flooding. This project wasn't free. The cost has been incalculable. CA budgeted $50K to mitigate a few things in the first year alone. Our stream was not in a floodplain. You could tell by the age and the species of the trees. This reckless decision has put personal property directly at risk. The project didn't stabilize the banks. There's more sediment in the stream than ever before, and now instead of a mature tree-lined stream, we have to look at invasive species-filled sediment islands in the stream, a plastic tube forest, and a good-sized repair of a failed stream bank at the culvert at Hesperus Drive. Who paid for that repair? In-stream work should be a last resort, not a best management practice. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. year. Slide 7 says they planted 5,500 trees. We were told they planted over 9,000, but many quickly died. Year 2 brought eroding stream banks and scattered riprap. In year 3, there could be no denying the project was failing. 700 more trees had to be planted to fulfill requirements of the exemption they received from the Forest Conservation Act. And this was quickly followed with a request by the contractor to be excused from their obligations for the remainder of the easement. Now in year 4, they will be implementing several repairs. The reforestation and project success rates must be determined at the end of year 5, not year 3. And all the while, we're being told this is a model and successful project. Slide 8, come on, man. The before picture is in the dead of winter and the after was taken in the fall. However, note the invasive species. Slide 11 is just plain sad. Birds and mammals have wings and legs. They come and go checking on previous food sources and shelter. These were all here before and so much more. It's not about what you see, it's what you don't see. Frogs and toads love murky, warm water. Where were the black-nosed dace seen and how were they counted? What about the turtles, crayfish, water snakes, newts, salamanders, countless insects, and bats? Yes, the multi-layer canopy was cool and shady, and it was awesome. But now it's just an urban-filled heat island with a biologically impaired stream. The contractor was paid millions, the SHA received credits, and the resident and wildlife were ripped off and disregarded, and we continue to be greenwashed. Please stop doing it tonight, and please do not repeat this mistake in Columbia again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Any questions? Karen was first and then Sky.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, for coming tonight. I have a quick question. So when you're talking about all the animals and species that used to live there, what is the likelihood of those species coming back to that watershed area?
There's a greater chance of the species that don't rely on the water quality of coming back, that still have any type of food source in the neighborhood or downstream in Long Reach, or can get up like beyond the park. The food source and the habitat has been removed, and projects rely on the existing populations that are left in the area to repopulate what was lost. The aquatic species, however, is a different story. The stream is deoxygenated, the water is warm, the pH has been changed. These are 3 things, if you have a fish tank when you're a kid, that you know you have to pay attention to: pH, oxygen, temperature. All 3 of those have been changed. So even if minnows like the black-nosed dace were to wash down into the stream from upstream, or if they manage to swim upstream from downstream, they can't survive in those conditions. They just can't survive in that water. It can't sustain life. Frogs, salamanders, toads, they just need water. They're not picky. I was just camping out in the wilderness, and you should have seen the amphibian eggs in just this tiny little warm puddle of mud. But, you know, fish, crayfish, some of the macroinvertebrates, these are your indicator species, and that's not what we're seeing coming back.
Okay, Sky, followed by Eric.
Yeah, could I have a copy of your testimony?
Yes.
And the term stream restoration sounds very positive. I'm wondering, and it's been used in every meeting for the past couple of years. Could you define it for those of us who haven't paid too much attention or are just tuning in? So what exactly is stream restoration?
I have to tell you, that's one of my most favorite questions you've ever asked me, because stream restorations is used for such a variety of practices. And out west, they do stream restorations where they remove logging slash that has filled in the stream from 100 years ago and completely cut off the water supply. And then when they remove the redwood out of the stream, they're finding that the salmon is returning to their ancestral spawning grounds. Here in New England, they're adding wood into the stream to create habitat for trout. So it really depends on the stream and the environment that you're talking about. Here, the stream restorations we're referring to in the Mid-Atlantic region are generally natural channel design, where they come in with heavy machinery. They typically grade the landscape, sometimes excavate the stream banks away, sometimes they realign the stream channel. They'll bring in imported materials and gravel to raise the stream bed to get it to flood into a created floodplain. Another method that they use that's called stream restoration is regenerative stormwater conveyance, which is also called step pools, where they'll put a series of basically little dams made of riprap to create pools along the way that will capture the stormwater runoff. And this is supposed to slow the runoff down and capture the sediment in these pools. And that actually does a pretty good job of capturing the sediment, but it requires somebody to go back then and maintain those pools. And the worst thing about those is that they really do completely destroy the biological community health of the stream, because they're just creating nothing but little warm, murky pockets of water, and they don't allow for fish passage because we don't have, salmon here in the Mid-Atlantic, so they're not jumping over the rock streams. So it's really, a disingenuous term, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's part of the problem is, you have a single mom who's been working all day, and she comes home, maybe she has to pick up her kids from school, do homework, get dinner. She's thinking about work the next day. She hears about a stream restoration in her neighborhood. I mean, that sounds good, right? Like, we thought, well, Columbia certainly would never do anything to hurt our trees. These typically have 30-day notices.
Thank you. That's quite a long definition.
Yes, it is.
Eric?
I liked your question, though. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Darren. So you mentioned 5,500 trees being planted and then the need to plant additional trees. Do you have any idea, or can you estimate the survival rate for the newly planted trees? Thanks.
Well, for the 700 that are planted, I really don't. A lot of them are not over the tops of the green plastic tubes, and I honestly have not looked down in there. I will say that the trees that I do see sticking above the tubes, all look like they're alive. So I'd like to be optimistic and say so far they're having a very good survival rate, but I really don't. I don't have one. And as you heard in Bob's testimony, in year 3 of the project, there was a 36% survival rate, and they're supposed to be, 75% at the end of 5 years. And I think, if I remember right, the contractor said they then had a 106% survival rate after they planted those 700.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Any other? No. All right, that concludes the resident speak out for this evening. You can remain, if you're virtual, and watch your live stream on the CA YouTube page. I will now take a moment to allow our staff to make the transition. Does anybody want a 5-minute break, or? All right, 5-minute break. This is our kind of our Consent agenda. The following items were approved by consent. Minutes of the March 28th, 2024 Board of Directors meeting, and the minutes for the following closed CA board meetings. So the end of the year. February 15th, February 22nd, February 27th, February 28th, March 20th, March 27th, March 28th, April 4th, and April 11th. We also approved the proclamation recognizing the first Friday in June as National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And we also approved the resolution to archive the 3 reading rule for major motions. So that was our consent agenda. I'll now move on to our regular agenda, and we have next is the independent look at the SHA stream restoration project. I know we have a little bit of a briefing coming up. I would ask the board members to hold your questions until the end so we can get through the briefing real quick, and then we can save time for questions. So, Dennis.
And with that, we'll turn it over to Jeremy.
We'll come back to this so we can keep your names.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought the presentation had been transmitted, but it had not.
All right, we'll give Jeremy a couple, and the IT a couple minutes to get things straightened out. But let's move on to board votes. And the first resolution coming up, the first vote is on the proposed fiscal year 2024 funding, emergency cash reserves. So the chair will introduce the resolution recommending the 2024 funding emergency cash reserve, which says basically, whereas the emergency cash reserve policy was approved in 2021, staff recommends a contribution to the emergency cash reserves in 2024. And whereas the 2024 board approved budget include projected funding of $3 million in the fiscal year 2024 emergency cash reserves, and whereas CA's fiscal year 2024 third quarter financial report shows CA anticipated cash position for April 30, 2024 to be stronger than it was budgeted. Now therefore be it resolved that the board of directors approves the addition to the emergency cash reserves of $3 million in fiscal year 2024 to bring the reserve balance as of April 30th, 2024 to $11,133,000. So I move that. Is there a second? Keith seconded.
Call the question.
Let me just ask, is there any discussion? No. See none, I will call the question. Is there any objection to the resolution? Hearing none, resolution is approved. So the next,
Mr. Chair, do we have to read the entire resolution since we have it in our board package and it's available to the,
I'll just read the last part if that's okay.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
I think that'll be better. Okay, our next one is on the proposed amendments to the CA purchasing policy. I will move that we approve the resolution. It says, now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Directors approves the resolution to update the Columbia Association's purchasing policy and procedures document with the amendments. 1, modify the purchasing policy to make it clear that it applies to the CA Board of Directors. 2, increase the competitive bid limits to $25,000. And 3, revise Section 4C addendum change orders as follows. An invoice that exceeds the approved purchase order amount, including change orders, shall not be processed for payment until the appropriate change order is approved. Okay, so I will move that as chair. Keith seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Karen.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against this one, Andy, so
that's
I think there's no reason for us to even make any changes to the purchasing policy. I think it works fine the way it is, and so there's no need to change it.
Any other discussion? If not, I will do a roll call vote. So this is on the purchasing policy resolution. Alan?
I'd like to abstain for the moment, but please come back to me.
Okay. Sky?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Karen?
No.
Eric?
No.
Bill?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Alan?
No.
No. Okay. It passes 4-3. Okay. Are you ready yet, Jeremy? No? Okay.
I'm not sure yet. I apologize.
No, that's okay. All right. We're going on to the play area policy. I will move this resolution. It says, now therefore be it resolved that the CA Board of Directors approves the resolution to update the Columbia Association. No, sorry, wrong one. Too many of them. I'm just.
It's his last night.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors approves the following resolution as proposed by the Play Area Work Group and contained in its documents presented to the CA Board of Directors on April 25th, 2024. It is resolved that the corporation will accept the Cluster Play Area Program Policy as the strategic plan for play areas to service Columbia for the next 20 years. Okay, I will move that we approve this.
I second it.
And Sky seconded.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to possibly make an amendment to this policy.
Yes, and then Eric also too.
All right.
Okay, Bill?
Just, I think it would be wise to have the cluster play area program policy updated every 5 years.
Okay. So you're going to make that amendment?
I'd like to make that amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to move that, and I would welcome a second.
Just a second.
I second it.
Bill and Sky. So the amendment is, that the cluster play area program policy be reviewed every 5 years.
Reviewed and updated.
Reviewed and updated every 5 years.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why 5?
That's what that's his amendment.
I know, why 5?
I felt that 5 was a Goldilocks, not too short, not too long. Yearly seemed a little bit overly intensive, and doing it every decade didn't seem to be the right number. So 5 felt very, very Goldilocks. I would welcome the discussion of a better time frame.
No, I wanted to know your rationale for 5.
Okay, so that's my rationale. Thank you.
Well, Eric has his hand too, and then Sky. Eric?
Well, I just want to make my own amendments, but we'll discuss this amendment first.
Okay. Sky?
Did you really want it updated at year 5, 10, 15, and 20, or just for the first 5 years to make sure that it's a good policy, and then it would continue.
Yeah, I would think it would be recurring every 5 years.
Okay.
So 5, 10, 15, 20.
Keith has his hand up.
Keith?
How do we ensure that it gets reviewed every, and it's not necessarily just for you, but if we're going to do that, we're going to vote today and then it's going to disappear into the nether. So how does that become if we decide to do that, how do we make sure that that happens?
Turn it to Dennis, who?
I think that's something staff should write into. So how we manage the policies going forward, I think almost all the policies should have a sunset provision of some kind. They age out of a certain number of years. And once we catch up and go through them all, then written into, I think, every policy, there's a review after, because they've almost all aged out over time or need to be updated. So that is on staff.
So you're suggesting we just sort of put in the policy, and then as we look at it, staff will have to keep track?
It won't be just.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be just this one. There'd be others that would come up.
Alan's got his hand.
Alan?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know what the right number is, but regardless of whatever is written into a policy like this, the then current board of directors can always say, hey, we want a review. So I'm not sure putting in a number makes a whole lot of difference.
Karen?
Thank you. Two things. Thank you, Dennis, for your answer previously, because that answered the question I was going to ask. And then two is I think that because of the nature of this board, I don't think you should leave things to chance, because the board changes hands and people have different priorities when they join the board. So it's better to put, like, Bill's idea is a good one, because it should automatically come up on a schedule of things. That's actually a very good compliance policy management. I think that's a very good idea. So Alan, as much as I understand what you're saying, let the board do what the board's going to do, I think that probably does the future boards a disservice.
Sky? Yeah.
I guess this is a question maybe for Dennis. I used to work for a very large organization in a very large department of that organization, and we had somebody look at all the policies and procedures every 6 months. I'm sure that's probably not necessary every 6 months here, but has there been anything like that in place in the past, Dennis, or?
No. So the legal office is going through the policies now and taking a look, and there's some that have obviously aged out and should be eliminated, but I think we're going to have to catch up, which is going to take a little bit of time. Then after that, we can get into a recurring cycle, and there should be a sunset provision that every 5 years or so you look at, and some of them you say, okay, that's absolutely, we're not going to do that, or we will. I think that'll be the majority of them, but there'll be a few like this that, the play area equipment has changed, or something, or the dollars have changed. So, we haven't done it in the past, because you can recognize that by virtue of the policy about smoking and others that we have in our existing group of policies, but that should happen.
Jeremy?
Might I offer some context from Jason Heath, who sort of was key in developing this policy and worked with our playgrounds every day and knows the industry, so he could provide some color to this.
Thanks. This actually came up in one of our work sessions with the work group. So we landed on 20 years based on the type of policy this is. So we only replace, So we only replace 7 play areas per year out of 174. So if we do this every 5 years, you'll never implement what you're starting with. So we thought 20 was a fair number. It should probably realistically even be a little bit longer. But during the work group, we also spoke about, it may not change the policy, but doing a survey just to feel where the community's at, maybe every 8 years. So that's, it wasn't written into the guideline or policy, but that was the intent.
Thank you.
Bill, do you want to change your amendment?
Eric's got his hand too.
Okay, so we have an amendment that Bill made that the cluster play area program policy be reviewed and updated every 5 years. So I'm going to take the vote on that.
Eric has something to-
Andy?
Oh, sorry.
I realize I do have a question of the implications of that.
Okay.
Reviewed could simply mean the board brings it up and says, do we really need an in-depth review? But the review word in there sounds like we're requiring staff, and I want to make sure this is the intention of the amendment, requiring staff to do the update, to do a full review, which imposes a burden on the staff in terms of time. And the board in 5 years may decide it's not needed, but the policy says it has to happen. So which comes first, the board's decision that yes, we'll go ahead with a full review in the 5 years, or the review happens automatically and it gets brought to the board's attention?
Bill, what was your intention?
Well, my intent is, and using some of the data that we've found out here, if we're changing out 7 per year, in 5 years, you'd change out 35 tot lots. You want to maybe survey the areas where 35 tot lots have been replaced, right? If that's 7 per year, 5, that's simple math, right? Let's find out what people thought of it. Is this program still effective? Is it doing what it's intended? That would be the purpose of a review, right? Make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community as the will of the community, or as policy or any other regulatory things shifted in the last 5 years that we need to account for to make sure that this policy is still effective moving forward. That would be a review. I would not.
I understand that, Bill, but that's not my question. My question is your intention that review happens every 5 years, or is it your intention that the board looks at this policy and decides whether such a review is wanted every 5 years?
Good question. You're putting me on the spot there. I would believe that we would do it every 5 years. If it's the will of the board that it's just a board review, and then if warranted, direct staff to take steps, that would be fine, I guess. But I would think that the review would be the thing you'd want to do. I think in either case, you want to at least take this, dust it off after 5 years and say, how have we done? Are we meeting the needs of the people? And what do we do to go forward and continue with what the spirit of this is? If the answer to that is nothing, and the board doesn't believe that you have to do a review, that would be the will of that future board. So I'm not going to be definitive on it, but I'll leave it up to the members here to decide way they would like to go.
Well, except, Bill, you made the motion.
Okay, well, my intent was that we would do a full review every 5 years.
Okay,
if the will wants to be just an assessment to review, that's really semantics to me, and whatever the will of the board is.
So, Alan, I would say that the amendment basically says staff will do a review and report to the board every 5 years.
That's what I'm hearing. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Bill.
Yes.
So, Eric, do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, and so this is the type of amendment that I think could apply to just about every policy, and maybe should apply to every policy. So one thing we might consider is to establish a policy that governs policies that would include things like sunset rules. So the question I have is, should we develop that type of thing and have it, instead of trying to do this for every single policy, have just a policy that sort of governs everything, including this type of sunset provision? Because what I'm afraid of is, like, we'll have a sunset provision for this, and then a different type of provision for something else, and then we get into a state where all our policies are all over the place. So just an idea that we might want to have a policy that governs how policies generally work, and that would sort of address these type of issues.
So I think that's a novel idea. I think we should seriously consider that.
Yes. So what I suggest, though, is that is an issue for the next board. It's not really. I mean, here we are looking at a particular policy, and in general, we don't take a particular policy and then suddenly vote at the last minute for an expansion across all policies. So I think good idea, but it needs to come up through the process as we usually do policies. And so it would be an issue for the next board. Sky.
So I assume in 5 years, the board could say, we don't need a review this year.
The board is always free to make its own decision.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm going to ask one of two things happen. Either I withdraw my amendment and we move on, or I'm going to call the question. Which one?
I'm going to call the question.
All right, sir.
We are going to, it's up here. All right, I'm going to take a vote. Bill?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Keith?
No.
Sky?
Yes.
Alan?
No.
And I'll vote yes. So motion passes. Eric, you had a second motion.
Yes, I'd like to, in the cluster play area policy, amended to add the text between the last paragraph that says the program area guidance document, which shall be publicly available and revised as needed. Between revised as needed, I would like to add the text revised by the board of directors. So I move to amend the charter play area policy to add the text by the board of directors after revised. So we're clear who has the ultimate authority in revising the play area guidance.
All right, give me just a minute here. So the amendment Eric put forth is that the document be revised by the CA board.
Yes, the play area and program guidance document shall be publicly available and revised. And this would be the added text by the board of directors.
So my only question is since this is a board policy, it would require the board to do any revisions to it, right?
I thought that too, but it's a guidance. It's not the policy.
It's not the policy, it's the guidance. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to have Eric, does somebody need to second his motion so we can have a discussion? I second Eric's motion.
Yes, I'm amending the policy so that for the guidance to get updated, it would require board approval. Because right now it's not clear who gets the final say in approving the guidance.
I thought we were going to add the guidance to the policy. I thought that was one of our things we asked for last week, was taking the guidance, because the guidance was really the policy, saying that take the policy and the guidance, it wasn't guidance anymore, the whole thing was going to be part of the policy.
Bill.
We're getting into wordsmithing here, and it's fine. I think Eric's heart is in the right place. But as stated, it sounds like if we change this, the board would be responsible for typing. And I just want to make sure that, as revised by the board, has its proper intent. Right? It sounds like we're physically revising this. Right? Is there a better way to say it? I just want to make sure. Am I being overly crazy here?
I understand. Yeah, I understand. Keith?
The only thing I would probably caution against is this says industry standards and community priorities. I don't know that I want to get involved in the board approving industry standard updates, because that happens frequently in terms of what we can, I imagine, in terms of what we can and can't do. Now, community priorities is the piece that I think is the critical element, because we went through this whole process. So for someone to just change that, that would be more concerning to me than wanting to approve every revision based upon industry standards.
Eric just has his hand up, and then Karen.
We approve lots of policies based on industry standards. We just approved we approved the cash reserve policy, and that's based on industry standards. So it's not unheard of for us to approve things based on industry standards or community policy.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what was the policy we approved in industry standards?
Even the cash reserve, that's
The what?
Based on industry standards that Susan presented to us when she
Oh, the reserves policy, is that what you're talking
the
about, Eric?
reserve policy, the cash reserve
Emergency
policy.
cash reserve policy.
So,
Okay.
yeah, there's lots of things that we approve based on industry standards. Industry doesn't approve it; we approve it. It's the industry that sort of sets the standard. We're not setting any standards here.
Karen, Keith, and Dennis.
Yeah, so what I was going to say, I'm actually responding to Keith and Eric, is that, so Keith, based on all the things that you've always said all year, how I would understand this is, if industry standards change, then staff needs to come to us and say, the board policy is no longer appropriate because we have an industry standard change, and they want to bring it to us and say that the policy is changing. Or that the board rather needs to change the policy. That's how I would see it.
Yeah, that's not how I interpret that, but.
Okay, and then, I mean, industry, things do change, and this is a board policy. I mean, so I feel like, while I agree with Eric, I feel like it's a board policy, we're the only ones who can revise it, right? It can't be revised. If we approve this cluster play area policy, it's a board policy.
I think the better wording is only the board can approve a revision to the policy. Not, the board's not going to revise the policy. The board's going to approve a revision to the policy. I mean, I think that's probably a better phrasing.
So so can I offer a friendly amendment to Eric then, and then instead of saying revised by the CA board as needed, instead at the end of and community priorities as approved by the CA board? That would be, does that make sense?
Ask Eric.
Yeah, I'll accept the amendment, but I just want to clarify, this doesn't refer to the policy, it's actually referring to the guidance. So the text is basically saying that the board approves changes to the guidance document, and the policy refers to the guidance. So this is where I think this was set up. It's a little more complicated than I would have liked, where we've got a policy that the policy refers to a guidance document. But basically what I'm trying to clarify is that in the policy, it doesn't really state who approves changes to the guidance document. And the idea behind this amendment is that the board approves changes to the guidance document. That's the idea. Okay,
so Eric, my question then is, I thought that we said in the last meeting that the guidance was going to be part of the policy. That was my question. Maybe I've got the minutes in front of me, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it.
I'm just operating based on what's in the packet.
So Karen, can you restate your amendment just to make sure Eric's clear?
Yeah, my friendly amendment is, instead of putting by the CA board after and revised, is just at the end of and community priorities, comma, as approved by the CA board.
I'll accept that.
Dennis.
Careful.
I would lobby that you approve the policy and let your professional staff, and then we're going to work with the community. That's what we do every day. And so we're going to go to the community and talk about tot lots and what's going to go there. But, you know, I think you're going to get too deep into this if we have to come back to you for every little change that happens. Keith,
you said it.
Eric, and then we're going to call the question.
Yeah, I'll point out that the policy basically has 3 items, 2 of which are copied in the guidance. And the guidance, I think, is broad enough that it would represent the policy. So I agree with Karen that the guidance, I think, should be the policy. And the policy itself is, I mean, given that 2 of the items are already in the guidance word for word, the policy itself is in the weeds if the guidance is in the weeds. They're written at the same strategic level. So I think if the board has to approve the policy, the board should also be approving this guidance, given that they're both at the same strategic level.
All right, I'm going to call Keith.
No, just because there's similar language in 2 documents doesn't mean that they're both at the same level. A guidance is a really detailed document, and like Dennis said, there are constantly, based upon the updates that we received earlier in this session, there are always updates that are happening to, size and the depth of mulch and, the materials and things like that. But I don't know that we want to see all of that on an ongoing basis. I'd rather receive a report if you wanted to talk about it from that standpoint than to like a report of changes as opposed to approving all of the changes that go into the guidance. And if you look at that, at what's in there, there's just a lot to be discussed and to go through each time that we want to make a minor change that comes out, on like you said, a fairly regular basis. So I would hope that we wouldn't move forward with this, but I'd rather change it if and I know this guy's going to get mad at me for saying this, but I'd rather add like a friendly amendment that said instead of board approval that we get an annual report of changes if we wanted to go that far, so that if you have a concern about things that have happened, it can just show up in our annual report, and then we can take an issue at that point and say, okay, staff, why did you make this major modification to the plan, and you knew that wasn't the intent that we had for it. But I'd rather change it to report versus approve.
I do not accept the friendly amendment. I think things like having equipment for 5 and 12-year-olds is strategic, and I wouldn't want that to just change without the board being able to approve that.
All right, I'm going to call the question, and the amendment is that we add the language as approved by the CA board at the very end of the sentence. Implementation of the above policy will be informed by a cluster play area program guidance document, which shall be publicly available and revised as needed based on industry standards and community priorities as approved by the CA board. All right, call the question. Alan?
No.
Sky?
Yes.
Keith?
No.
Karen?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
And I'll vote no. The amendment fails. Any other amendments? If not, I'm going to call the question now on the actual amended motion. Remember, we added be revised every 5 years.
Eric has his hand up.
Oh, Eric? Oh, sorry. And then Keith. Eric?
I just took it down.
Okay, Keith?
I don't know how to word this or where to put it, but I kind of like my idea about an annual update on changes, because it's a significant piece of the environment, and I think we already infrastructure, and we already get a report about them. So I think it would be appropriate for us to get a report of change on an annual basis about this policy and guidance.
Are you making a motion?
I'm making a motion for all of that long stuff.
I'll second that.
Annual report that includes changes to the guidance.
All right, just a second. I have to write this down.
I told you I'd help you.
Right. Okay, Keith's amendment, seconded by Karen, says staff will provide an annual report to the CA board on changes to guidance.
As part of their playground tot lot update.
Oh, right. As part of play area update.
Are you good with my little change? Okay.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? Is there any opposition to that? No. All right, so that amendment is adopted. All right, let's go back then. We have the play area policy with the 2 amendments. So I would like to take the vote on that. Karen?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Sky?
What are we voting on?
We are voting on the play area policy with the 2 amendments.
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It passes. Yay. All right. Jeremy, are you ready?
Can we continue with the votes?
I'm good. The vote was 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, I mean,
6,
continue.
7, 0, 0.
No. Continue doing board votes considering we already started.
Well, we said we'd interrupt until Jeremy was ready. Yeah, we have a nice crowd here in the audience, along with the consultant. So let's move back to the presentation. Okay, Jeremy.
I serve at the pleasure of the chair, so.
But we're finished with the play area.
Yes, we finished the player. We got through that. By the way, I do want to thank everybody who stayed through for the presentation. Technology is always fun.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for the technical difficulties. My name is Jeremy Scharfenberg. I'm the Vice President of Community Operations. I'm joined by Sam Stribling from Tetra Tech, who completed the Transect study of the native and invasive plant species within the area as part of the study. I'll let Sam do a quick introduction so you know who's at the table with me.
So yes, Sam Stribling. If you know anything about publications, I publish as James, but I go by Sam as a nickname. I've been with Tetra Tech for about 34 years now. I saw somebody write down just the other day that I've been there 34 years. I am a biologist, a stream biologist. I know a lot about monitoring, like routine technical monitoring, but interpreting results and what they mean and all that kind of thing. And I have dabbled. I don't do stream restoration. What we do more is evaluating the effectiveness of stream restoration. So that's really kind of what I do. I have people, there are people in Tetra Tech that, I mean, it's a big company, and there are people who do that. They drive tractors and backhoes and stuff. I don't do that. But anyway, and I've gotten to know John McCoy quite a bit from when he was with the state's Watershed Restoration Division, and then since he's been here, we both serve on the Howard County Watershed Stewards Academy Advisory Committee. So.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
Welcome, Sam.
Fantastic. So I thought it would be helpful just to do a quick sort of update in terms of some background and context on the Longfellow Stream Restoration Project before we got into the details of Sam's study. So just a quick overview in terms of what the context will be in terms of some information around state and federal programs associated with stream restoration, how it's been around for a long time as a best practice. The Howard County Watershed Management Study that was completed in 2015 associated with this exact project, sort of a project overview in terms of some of the technical details of it, and in terms of some of the status in terms of the regulatory required monitoring reports that have been completed as part of the 5-year follow-on work. So just at the high level in terms of the Chesapeake Bay program, so this is sort of direct information off of the Maryland Department of the Environment's stream restoration website. So there's a copious amount of information about stream restoration, what it is, why it's important, how it's valuable in terms of ecosystem management and the value it provides to the Chesapeake Bay watershed in particular. So I provided sort of a hard copy. This is sort of in the little packet I provided, sort of supplemental information. I realized it'd be helpful to have some additional detailed information for folks, and I've emailed it to the board members who are virtual as well, so they got a copy of this packet. So, this is a federally administered, regulated process. It's part of the EPA's Chesapeake Bay program. Any of the type of the credits that are issued associated with these projects have been established and vetted as part of the regulatory process for environmental. Yeah.
Does anyone in the audience have this also?
No.
Okay.
I have extra copies.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
The people who are here for the. Sorry to interrupt. I just figured it wasn't posted, so.
Yeah, it's supplemental. I realized that some more information would be valuable for folks. Again, this is the current position of the Maryland Department of the Environment. This is not me, Jeremy Scharfenberg, making the statement that stream restoration is recognized by the US EPA's Chesapeake Bay program, and the state of Maryland is providing numerous water quality and ecological benefits, end quote. So that's state and federal guidance. So that's the highest level. I'm sort of moving down in terms of the next level of sort of regulatory structure is Howard County government, right? So this is this particular project. In fact, this Longfellow project was recommended in a Little Patuxent watershed assessment conducted by Howard County in 2015. This particular report is a significant amount of work. It's about 800 pages of detailed analysis of our watershed within Howard County, broken up into numerous sort of sub-watersheds. The Longfellow project actually falls within the Little Patuxent project, or Little Patuxent watershed, and this exact project was recommended to be implemented by Howard County's Stormwater Management Division. And there's sort of more details in there as well. So just sort of, I'll pull a quote out of it from the Howard County report from 2015. The proposed restoration will stabilize eroding banks and reconnect the stream channel to the floodplain. And that's sort of really the key piece of this type of work, and where federal entities, state entities, county entities find value in it is you're restoring stormwater flow to the floodplain, which slows it down, which reduces erosive force and stabilizes the stream.
Are we asking questions along the way? Or?
No.
Okay. All right.
It'd be nice to just get through it if possible. I'm open to it.
Fine.
I actually kind of like discussion, but it takes longer. And then this is just sort of a photo taken right out of the Howard County report. It hasn't been doctored in any way. This isn't an AI generated photo. This is right out of the report from Howard County from 2015. So that stream bank is cut. It's eroding. It's about 4 feet tall. If you would fall off that, you'd get injured. One of the little details that's in there, and you can see the actual photo in the handout I provided, but there's lots of exposed roots there. And what that means is those roots grew into soil at one point, a year ago. And that stream is eroding so aggressively, it's continuously exposing roots as it erodes back, as it cuts back, as that sediment, as that sort of stream bank wastes away, sort of stream bank wasting, and is carried downstream as a sediment load. And you can actually see a huge pile of sediment right here, which is sort of indicative of the status of this stream channel as being highly degraded, which is why Howard County recommended it to be restored and stabilized. So moving down sort of another level in terms of CA, sort of architectural structure as an organization in terms of our guiding principles. So stream stabilization is specifically called out as a mitigation measure within our watershed management plan. In fact, miles of stream bank stabilization is noted as a measure of success in this report. Our 2018 strategic plan specifically calls out stream stabilization as a goal for our organization. So I just sort of laid out federal, state, county guidance around how stormwater should be managed and how watershed management practitioners within CA are sort of operating under this rubric. And I provided copies to everybody in hard copy, and I highlighted the specific sections within those hard copies. So if you want to reference the strategic plan, if you want to reference the watershed management plan, I've highlighted exactly where stream stabilization and restoration is called out as a goal. And then moving on to the project overview itself, again, sort of following on from the recommendation now of the Howard County Little Patuxent Watershed Assessment. This project was identified by the Maryland Department of Transportation, likely looking at these resources for where are projects in this region to implement. It was implemented by Ecotone. They did a public procurement for this particular project, and Ecotone won the work. Again, so this work was solicited by the Maryland Department of Transportation and the State Highways Association. Let's see, it was completed in 2021, stabilized about 1.5 miles of stream across 3 different reaches or segments. So this is reaches a stream segment. That's sort of a terminology issue. And the key was to reconnect that stream to the floodplain. And that's the established goal of the Chesapeake Bay program, providing value to the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's established as a priority for Maryland Department of the Environment, Department of Natural Resources. In fact, this particular project was also, there's a tremendous amount of regulatory construct that these projects all have to navigate in compliance with numerous environmental regulations to make sure the social good is realized. We talked about the tree planting, in terms of restoring the site as part of the requirements, as part of the forest stewardship component, which again, so the forest stewardship aspect of this project was reviewed and approved by scientists at the Department of Natural Resources. So everything that you've seen and heard about this particular project has gone through numerous layers of regulatory review at the state and federal level. There's 5 years of monitoring associated with the project. Again, so this was completed in the winter of 2021. We just completed year 3. Commentary is noted about the request from Ecotone because the project is successful at stabilizing the stream, that they forego their future monitoring requirements. So we are going to request that not take place, of course. We do not want them to be relinquished of any monitoring requirements. We want them to go the full 5 years. And we can see why. It was noted that there's a small segment of erosion that's taken place just above Hesperus. That's part of the stream. So we stabilized 1.5 miles of stream, right? So it's a long run. So it's 7,000 feet of stream, right, plus or minus. So there is about an 8-foot section that has eroded associated with a stream sort of flow approaching a concrete apron at Hesperus. So that's actively being restored right now, and it's in the plan for Ecotone to maintain that. And then these are just some before and after photos. We can really see sort of the degraded state of this stream. And I think there's sort of a reality piece that folks need to understand in terms of the quality of streams in our community as a result of this town being developed, right? There's roads, parking lots, roofs. There's a tremendous amount of hardscape, and this has all significantly altered the hydrology of our watershed. And so there's significantly more flow moving through these streams than pre-development. And so they're highly eroded. There's numerous water quality issues that are a challenge that sort of directly impede any goals of functional uplift. Now, for this particular project, Longfellow, the goal was a TMDL reduction, so the goal was to stabilize the stream. There was no specific goal associated with functional uplift or biological quality of the stream. The goal is to stabilize the stream as a part of a TMDL requirement for Maryland Department of Transportation and State Highways Association. So it's understood and noted that there has not been functional uplift, and we don't expect any because there are lots of challenges near term. So for example, water quality monitoring in this space, it's the conductivity is really high, right? It's an endemic problem throughout our watershed. And this directly impedes macroinvertebrate populations, so aquatic life. So, that is a road salt issue, right? It's salt. So that's sort of one of the challenges, right? In terms of the other challenges from a water quality perspective are fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, right? They're ubiquitous in our community. And these are all things that impede functional uplift or improvement of biological conditions. But one thing that can help it is stabilizing the stream, right? So this is sort of one component of the puzzle that helps improve overall stream health. And this is what we've accomplished here.
Question?
Yeah.
Does
Okay. In terms of project status, so we've completed year 2 and year 3 assessments. The year 3 assessment was really detailed, and this is actually sort of a screen snap of it, where they actually did GPS monitoring and GIS elevations of the actual stream bed. So what this graph shows, and it doesn't really detail, it's just there for example, is the as-built conditions and then where it stands now 3 years later in terms of the stream bank being stabilized, meeting the requirements of the Corps of Engineers and MDE for stabilizing the stream. Let's see. Moving on.
And then in terms of the project status, so this is just an image of the stream actually working as intended, right? So the previous image showed heavily cut, eroded stream channel. This image shows the stream has been restored and reconnected to the floodplain. That's the goal, is reconnecting these streams to the floodplain so they don't erode. So the blue arrow is sort of the width of the flow at the time. And then the yellow arrow here is sort of where the sort of existing base flow stream channel is. So the stream is out in the bank. The sedge and rush plants there are doing the job on slowing the flow, dropping the sediment. So it's functioning as intended, meeting the objectives of the Corps of Engineers, of the Maryland Department of the Environment, to meet the goals of the Chesapeake Bay program. This is sort of the intent of this entire process that we participated in. This is just something that I noted in terms of, I live about 100 yards from this project. I walk by it every day, multiple times a day. And this is actually one of my favorite ecological systems in all of Columbia. We don't have very many lowland floodplain ecosystems like this. It's exceedingly rich in plant and animal life. There's a high diversity there. There's a lot of edges where in terms of different ecosystems, like a forest ecosystem has an edge with a floodplain ecosystem in this condition, and that is really conducive to a dynamic biological sequence where you have synergies of two different ecosystems. So I just wanted to list the animal species that are there because it is as robust from a plant and animal life population as you will find anywhere in Columbia. And I walk through all of Columbia all the time. It's my job, literally. Okay, so that was just a quick run through the project itself. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam real quick, who's going to go into some of the more detailed analysis that he and his team conducted in terms of the transect study for plants. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll
You can just roll down.
There you go. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jeremy. So what we had on this, now everybody has this in front of them with the handout, I believe. So we first went down, John McCoy, and we had on my team, the people doing the field work is probably the best person in the entire Mid-Atlantic to be doing the botanical survey, and that's Jill Swearingen. She's the one on the left in this photo, and she's published a book on invasive plants of the Mid-Atlantic, and it's in its 5th edition now, and she's very well recognized in that arena, so we know we have good identifications of the plants there. And John's sort of explaining to the little group of us here, that's Jeff White and Nancy Roth there, just on the first day, kind of getting a lay, so we could become a little bit familiar with what the stream and the area looked like. And, you've seen some of these before, and it is a stable stream. The banks are not eroding here. Some of the information I've read on prior to the work being done is there was a lot of down cutting, channel widening, a lot of sediment being produced and washed downstream. And from my years of experience doing this, looking at stream biology, habitat is the main thing. There's a lot of different things that cause biology not to, be quote unquote be happy, but it's always habitat is what jumps out first. And this is a stable stream. The habitat looks pretty good. It's not exactly natural, but it's stable. And just a couple of shots of that. But so the design that we put here, there are 7 transects here, and it was sort of a systematic. We start at the top, so the level 4. Yeah, I can't really see that. I don't know if other people can or not. So transect 4 is above where any of the restoration work happened, and all the 5 in the middle are where the restoration work actually took place, and then the lowest one is below, is downstream. That's 7. That's outside of all the restoration. So what they did, Jill and Jeff actually, these are about 3 feet wide, and what they did is they identified the species, and then they got the species names on them, and then they later they said these are native. I mean, they knew out in the field, but they documented later whether they were native, non-native, and what kinds of plants they were. But species level on all of them. Okay, it's not working. Okay. So we did come out with it's just by chance that it came out as 100 species, but so 76 of those turned out to be native species, 24, so, 3/4 of them were native, 24 and 1/4 non-native. And of course, Jill being a non-native specialist, she was not she doesn't like to see any of them, but she was not completely unhappy with this, at least with the plant diversity there. This simple graph here, these bar charts, or the bars are arranged from upstream to downstream, left to right. This shows the proportion of, remember we're talking about 100 species is cumulative over all this. It's not at any one site. So that's over the whole thing. And you see, there's a higher percentage just as far as number of species. There's a higher number of natives than there are non-natives, and you have the highest number of species is actually within the restoration reach itself, and actually the highest number of non-natives as well. Natives as well. And this is just dividing the taxonomy a little bit more, the identities of them, and breaks it into different types of plants, from grasses to shrubs and trees. I don't want to get into all the detail there, but just sort of shows you that there is a diversity of different kinds of plants there. We do have all the data in the report that you can get to the species level names if you want those. Didn't figure we'd have time to get into it tonight. And if you look at non-natives, of course, there's only 24 different species here, so there's going to be that's why the bars are so short there. And there's a handful of non-natives, 24, as I said, and you get a higher number of species of non-natives in the more upstream area. Now, just looking at species diversity is one thing, but then what's really important with plants is looking at percent cover, and this is where you could see there's issues, some negative things going on here, more negative things going on here. The non-natives are the orange part, so even upstream of where the restoration work, look at the Transect 4. There's most of that there is non-native coming in. And there's a high percentage. This is cover, so this is estimated cover within the transects they walked along. So percent of the area that where the non-natives versus natives are inhabiting or growing. And getting into the conclusions and recommendations, and we've already heard the stilt grass, the wavy leaf basket grass brought up a couple of times. Yes, they're definitely posing a threat to the plant community here, the botanical community. And hand weeding, time intensive. It's labor intensive, and it also noted the timing of this is important. I don't have those dates right in my head, but Jill, this is one of Jill's recommendations, and she would be able to tell you exactly, and the series of months that it would be best to be able to do the mechanical removal. And I know John McCoy is involved with a group, or runs a group called the Weed Warriors, and that would be the type of activity that you would get into this. I don't know about the herbicides either, but that would be something where you would want to be very careful with it and very focused, and as much as possible use this pesticide that it's very focused on these species, so it doesn't hit non-target things. There are species pesticides, herbicides that don't, they minimize the effect on non-target organisms. So that's what you'd want to look for there. Deer browse is going to be a problem with getting getting more shading in there in the multi-story canopy. it does take monitoring. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a monitoring guy, and I think that there should be a couple of things, and, Jeremy hit me if you don't want me to say this, but adaptive management, if you monitor, you see what's working well, what's not working well. If it's not working well, you figure out what your next steps are. So adaptive management is very important in this. So again, the site does have a pretty diverse plant community there, plant assemblage there. We talked about the mix of native and non-native. Do recognize on these numbers that we're using as far as number of species, there were 11 that were put in there by the seed mix, so they spread the seed when they were doing the planting. This goes back to the mechanical weeding of the non-native species. There needs to be I don't do this myself, but I know people who do have an invasive plant management program. So you'd have, for these different areas where you're doing restoration, you would want to pay attention to that and have a part of the management program would be monitoring the cover, the emergence of non-natives and doing what is necessary to get rid of them. And I don't know, frankly, I'm sorry about this. I didn't have time to really figure out or talk to anybody about how similar systems in other parts of the county or other parts of the state might compare to this as far as numbers of non-natives and natives. I just didn't have time to do that yet. So that would be something, that's part of monitoring, though, is have something to compare it to as you go along. I believe that's it. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sam. Anything else you want to add quick? Jeremy, I'm going to open for questions.
Well, just to follow on from his conclusions and recommendations. So you saw we had a really nice video at the beginning of this meeting about our invasive plant management program. So we are very active in managing this site already. So from go, we have been an exceptional steward of the site in terms of managing invasives. So Eric Walker has been through this site multiple times, identifying invasives, actively removing them, actively applying chemicals as needed in a targeted basis where appropriate. So the recommendations that Sam has made about actively managing this project from a invasives perspective, we're already doing it.
Okay, go for questions. Karen, then Sky, and then I'll start with the rest.
Microphone, Andy.
I turned it off. Okay, we'll go to questions. Karen, Sky, and Keith, and then we'll rotate around.
Jeremy, did I understand you correctly? Did you say that functional uplift of the stream was never an objective or a goal of that stream restoration?
It wasn't a direct goal. It was a anticipated secondary or tertiary goal. But the goal from a regulatory perspective was to stabilize the stream, which was it's established within our watershed management plan and our strategic plan. And the TMDL credits were associated with stabilizing the stream. The hope is that the expectation is that there would be secondary and tertiary benefits of the restoration that would facilitate functional uplift. But
how is that functional uplift going to happen? Because based on what, I'm really curious to hear, I want to hear your perspective, because based on what our resident experts told us is for the water, there's no seed system to actually provide that uplift. So how are we expecting if functional uplift, because it sounded to me like what you were saying was we should stop talking about functional uplift because we're not going to get that. So how are we going to get that if it is still a goal?
Well, as I noted, and based on Maryland Biological Stream Survey information, virtually all of the streams in our community are of poor or very poor quality. It's a challenge throughout our community. So this stream, before we got there, in addition to being highly eroded, was of poor or very poor quality. So the baseline was already at the bottom. So any challenges associated with improving functional uplift were only improved because we improved the habitat structurally.
But we didn't improve the habitat is what you're telling me.
No, we improved the habitat structurally by stabilizing it.
Okay, so then can you tell me about stabilizing the stream too? Because you said it's stable except for one section, but it looked like it was multiple sections that are being improved. What is the length? So it's a 1.2 mile section of stream that we did a stream restoration on. how long are the sections that still require stabilization?
I don't have an exact number on.
Is it more than one?
I think there's 3 sites that they've identified based on their year 3 monitoring that they're going to go back and do a repair on.
Okay, and then my other question is, I apologize, I can't recall your name from Tetra Tech.
Sam.
Hey, Sam, thank you very much. Your information was incredibly helpful. So we have a problem with a tree survival rate, and you put in your conclusions and recommendations that a multi-story canopy shading would be helpful. How can we ever achieve that?
I mean, to me, it's, you're doing plantings of the right kind of plants, and you're, for everything from the lower canopy to shrubs to trees, and it takes a management program to make sure that they're living, monitoring, making sure they're not getting damaged. See, part of I have a little bit different definition of what restoration is than a lot of people, and I'm not sure, I know it's not universal. To me, to look at, because I'm an aquatic insect guy. Right. So, if you have aquatic insects that are healthy and happy in the stream, that means the conditions are right for them to be there. Right. So what we're doing as far as restoration is everything we could do to remove the things that don't allow them to be happy or have a healthy community. So part of this habitat is part of that. So if you got a degraded habitat, that they won't be allowed to, they won't be able to survive and reproduce in the stream. That contributes to the Chesapeake Bay stuff that Jeremy's talking about, because it's holding back sediment, it's holding back nutrients that aren't getting to the bay. But if you're within a reach of the stream channel, if you have paid attention to those issues, not only the habitat, the sediment, the water chemistry, the shading, all the different aspects, whatever's coming in from upstream, if it's erosive storm flows, and I know that was done here, you're making it possible for the organisms to actually survive and reproduce in that reach. So if they're not doing that, that means there's some things that aren't done yet.
Right, so we have a 36% survivability rate of all those trees, and we've just planted 700 more, and it's my understanding that those trees are actually drowning because the ground is too wet and the trees can't grow. So what do we do to mitigate that?
Well, if it's a floodplain that is staying wet, it's some kind of wetland now, it needs to have wetlands plants in it, not trees.
So have we made a mistake by planting all those trees?
Unless there are trees that are intended for wetter soils.
So have we made a mistake in planting all those trees?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Possibly.
Sky.
Sounds like a discussion. Does stabilizing the streams include maintaining the erosion of the stream banks?
You mean maintaining? You mean
keeping them constant as they are currently?
Yeah, in that science of fluvial geomorphology, it's when you're talking about stream channels, you're really talking about it's more of a dynamic equilibrium, so you're having some erosion in some places and some aggradation in other areas, that when you're in an urban situation like this, you don't always have, streams naturally meander, and over hundreds of years, centuries, they naturally meander and they change shape. When you're in systems the way we're in, they're not necessarily able to do that because they don't have the room, right? So the key to this kind of work is not having one technique that you use. It's having a toolbox, and you figure out what's the best thing to use. It's not natural channel design. It's not RSC. It's not necessarily a step pool kind of thing. It may be, but it may not be. But they've got to figure. People who do this kind of work figure out what's the best thing to do, the best way to do it, and to retain as much sediment as possible and try to prevent stream channel from getting into accelerated erosion. That's when you start having problems in streams, is when the rate of erosion gets too fast. It increases too much. That's really the problem there.
Okay. And my bias is that I was a zoologist, not a botanist. So why is there the emphasis on plants rather than animals? Except animals move, so they're harder to count, and plants just kind of spread out. And so there's more poundage in plants than there is in the animals in the stream bed. So why are we focusing on the plants?
To help stabilize the soils.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you define reach?
It varies on the design. I mean, you know, when I do stream monitoring, what I call a site is a 100-meter reach. What the state of Maryland does is a 75-meter reach. So it's just how you define it.
What is a reach? Is it?
It's a length of stream channel. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a length of stream channel.
That's what I was getting at. And I have a lot of questions about the graphs, but just two real quick ones. Would you say that that Transact number 4 could be a baseline? And are all the transects equidistant? And have you looked at the variability of other variables between the transects, and especially Transact 7? Doesn't it have another stream coming into it, or isn't there some kind of a road there?
There's more analysis that could be done with this, for sure. As far as the distance in between them, you know, I asked the field team to set the transects on what they thought would give a representative picture of what's going on, and this is what they chose to do. And they only had 3 days, 3 field days or something, so they didn't have a whole lot of time out there. So and as far as number 4 being a baseline, I wouldn't say so, because it's primarily non-native up there. So
right, but you didn't know that when you selected.
That's correct.
4. So,
That's correct.
So the methodology, the protocols were done downstream from Transact 4.
What methodology?
It applied to all of the transects.
Yeah, we did the same thing on all transects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keith? I don't have as many, I guess, complex questions necessarily, but I wanted to clarify something. You made the statement that the water quality was poor or was degraded prior to this, so that wasn't something that was being targeted. What's the baseline that you had for that?
Well, it's
hot potato, right? It's yours.
Sure. Well, I referenced the American Biological Stream Survey database. So it's a publicly available website where you can log in and see source data around water quality metrics for streams throughout Maryland, right? And you can zoom right into Columbia, and you can see all the red dots and all the red triangles in and around Columbia, indicating poor or very poor water quality conditions in our community as a result of it being developed and, you know, having all the complicating issues associated with it.
So it's really, we know that there's some degradation that's there, but we don't know if it's the same as post. We know that there was degradation, but we don't know if the degradation is the same or it's better or worse following the restoration.
So post restoration, there are multiple sort of water quality studies happening. So one component of SAM's work has yet to be completed. They're going to work on that this year, which is a fish study, sort of a more detailed, because you mentioned animals, not plants. But so that is sort of a phase 2 of Tetra Tech's work, providing sort of their third-party assessment of this project is a fish survey, so that's coming. MDE is also doing water quality sampling within these streams, within these reaches associated with this project. And then we also have our stream waders. They're actually going to be out at this location on either tomorrow. I think tomorrow there's a stream waders event. And they're actually going to be in this stream doing a macroinvertebrate study as an indicator of water quality.
Okay, so I just want to go back to that then. Was MDE, was anyone doing that monitoring or sampling before we did this project?
So not specific to this exact site was their precondition macroinvertebrate sampling happening. It's happening sort of organically throughout our community as part of our Stream Waders program, and as part of other initiatives like MDE and DNR are also doing sort of occasional spot monitoring of water quality as part of their work. And that typically is all aggregated into the Maryland Biological Stream Survey information that I noticed. So there's multiple sources of that data.
So if it wasn't this specific, that we may be able to make reference to something close by or something substantially the same? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy's referring to the MBSS, the Maryland Biological Stream Survey. Now, the way the indicators for stream degradation are benthic macroinvertebrates and fish, so aquatic insects and fish that are in the water, and they use and that's a lot of what I do with the aquatic insects. You take a sample, you run your calculations, you compare it to a threshold, a degradation threshold. It's either, falls above the line, it's not degraded, below the line, it is degraded. And it's a lot more complicated than that, of course, but and where those lines are drawn are based on really statewide sampling. They have, the MBSS has, 600, they probably have 1,000 sites that they've done all over the country, all over the state. And Howard County has a lot of sites that they've sampled as well, and all compared to the same threshold. So when you said water quality first, I thought you were talking about water chemistry.
I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm asking.
No.
I'm not an expert, so I appreciate hiring people to come in and talk to us about it. But I'm just trying to understand, baselining, because, even going forward, it seems like we need to have ongoing systematic monitoring processes for these areas so that we can, these conversations just become a lot easier. But I hear what you're saying in terms of those standards, and as long as it's above or below the standard, we don't necessarily know the gradation of where they fall on that. We just know that it's either good or it's not, kind of.
You do some, but some people can overinterpret these numbers.
Okay.
I try not to do that, because I think if you're, you've heard the term, how many angels dance on the head of a pin? That's what you get into, is like trivia that I think it doesn't serve us well. I do think that, routine and systematic monitoring is the way to go. And one of the things that's been frustrating for me over the years, a lot of, like, as Jeremy mentioned, you sample all over the place, everything comes back bad. It's like, what do we do here? But it's also that when you do restoration, you're not, I encourage people not to just work toward that number, that threshold, because you may never get there. But the work you're doing will help push it in that direction. So you want to go in the direction of unimpaired. If you get past it, above it, that's great. But if you could push it closer to that, that's what watershed management is, the stream management.
Cool. I have other questions, but I'll let go for anyone else who wants to.
Okay. Eric, Alan, any questions?
None here.
Alan?
I guess my question for Jeremy is, a lot of what you presented as evidence that these are best practices were stated as intentions, that this is what this aims to provide. And I guess the question ultimately that we have to look at for future projects like this is, did it provide? And so I think of the bottles of water that Sharon Boyce has brought in here from that stream that sure look pretty ugly to me. So whereas before the water was clear, when there were still some of those challenges you were talking about that existed in past years. So I guess what I'm looking for, so what I'm hearing is evidence that there's plants variety, nice. Your anecdotal evidence that you've seen lots of different species, that's great. But I'm not hearing, but there was those species before. So I guess I'm not hearing the improvement that was promised. Help me understand that.
Well, the intent of the goal of the project was to stabilize the stream.
Because if we didn't,
Because it's recommended as best practice for stream health, as Sam mentioned, it's one of the key components. You have to have the habitat for the biologics to live in and be successful. So that's one of the key components. The water chemistry is the other piece. So by stabilizing the stream, you have the environmental benefit of the habitat, and you also have the reduced sediment loading going downstream into Wild Lake, which is part of the TMDL program. So it's the goal of the Chesapeake Bay program to reduce sediment loading moving downstream. This project was funded with that intention as sort of based under, so, as I mentioned, every step away along this process from design to monitoring, there are multiple layers of regulatory review. So the very concept of this project and what its intent was and what its objectives were was reviewed and approved by Department of Natural Resources, Maryland Department of the Environment, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So this was permitted rigorously to achieve these standards based on industry best practices. The Year 3 monitoring report, which sort of has the chart which shows the stream channel itself, sort of which was a elevation run. I think there was 300 data points that were taken throughout that stream to measure the exact elevation of that stream relative to the as-built conditions to demonstrate that it was stabilized. So those are quantitative metrics that it is stabilized, it is meeting the goals as stipulated by the project for the TMDL permitting for the MDOT sort of SHA project for their goals for environmental mitigation. So it is meeting its objectives based on regulatory standards as reviewed and approved by the authorities to say so, which is the Corps of Engineers and MDE.
Bill, do you have any questions?
so there is less runoff. We can see that into Wild Lake, for example.
Well, so sediment migration downstream takes years, right? So there's entrained sediment that slowly migrates down with every rainstorm. And so it will take time for these benefits to be reflected in actually what happens in Wild Lake.
Okay, last question. I thought somebody else brought it up, but I'm not sure I heard the answer. Why is it that we expected 70 whatever % of the trees to live and only half of that did?
Off the bat, I will say the primary challenge with our entire forest ecosystem is the fact that our deer population is 10 times the carrying capacity. So it's very.
We knew that going in, right?
Yes.
That's not a new thing in the last year or two.
No, it's not, which is why we have 5 years of active monitoring to make sure there is the required amount of success, again, as stipulated by the Department of Natural Resources for their forest stewardship requirements. So again, we're not making this up. This isn't Jerry Scharfenberg saying this is okay. This is scientists and engineers at the Department of Natural Resources, at MDE, at the U.S. Corps of Engineers. So scientists and engineers that live and breathe this stuff. This is what they do. These are the standards. So they approved it. So it's meeting these standards. And I mean, deer browse is ubiquitous. I mean, I think it's probably one of the greatest threats we have throughout all of open space in terms of our native plant population and our trees throughout. So would I say the likely culprit is deer? Probably. There are lots of factors for why a tree doesn't live, which is why we have the 5 years of monitoring and why they replanted the 700 trees this past fall and why we're now at 108% of the requirements, again, established by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources as part of their forest stewardship requirements.
Last question, Jeremy, related to that. What happens after 5 years if we keep having only half the number of trees that keep getting planted live?
Well, getting back to the tree species question, so they would have planted trees that like wet feet. That's the terminology, right? They like to be in lowland floodplains. So it's very intentional that those trees that are planted for that particular ecosystem and in that floodplain. And I mentioned at the end of Sam's presentation that we're actively monitoring that spot. I have personally planted, 20 trees on that site with these hands right here. So
you didn't use other hands?
I know, I didn't use other hands. I had a small army of children with me that were my labor. No, just kidding.
Those are the other hands.
That's right. Those are the small hands. So we have a very active afforestation and forest management program. We actually struggle. It's hard for us to plant trees. I'm just going to say it. It's hard for us to plant trees in this town. Everybody loves trees till you actually try to put them somewhere. So I'm just going to lay that out there. So we have no shortage of energy and drive to plant trees, and we will love to continue to saturate this particular site with trees.
Bill.
I've really liked this conversation, and I've been trying to come up with questions that are tied to the plant survey. I've got hundreds of questions about all of the above and the greater project. With respect to the plants that have been reviewed in the different transects and the continuing problem with water quality, of those plants that were observed, are there any in particular that are adept at removing known TMDL vectors that you want to get out of there, the phosphates, the nitrogen, that kind of stuff? Are there any plants that are particularly well suited for helping in that kind of way? And is there any plants that could help with the more common pollution with the, pesticides, herbicides, and so on?
I don't know about particular species, but the fact that there's a pretty vigorous plant community there, density, moderately healthy community, it does a couple of different things. It helps keep sediment, so it helps, retain sediment so you're not eroding and losing that downstream. Also, and I don't even know how to measure this. There are people who look at carbon retention, and that's call it a carbon sink.
Yeah.
So that's one of the goals of that kind of, this kind of work, and particularly floodplains, to do that. So, but the more the non-natives take over, it's going to become less healthy. It's going to probably erode more as the natives start dying out, and also not doing as good a job at retaining nutrients. So it's all kind of interconnected like that.
Right. Okay. And just another, being from Wild Lake, we're in the lowlands of all this stuff. Everything rolls down to us in Wild Lake, and we have a reaches stream that's downstream of this project that was not touched and continues to. We've had, you talk about 1 in 3 trees growing in Longfellow. There's been at least a dozen trees that have fallen in Faulkner Ridge in that stream in the same time period, full, mature trees. And do you think it would be important to study that part of the stream in addition to what's going on in the actual, area that was?
You said the big trees fell?
Into the creek there, into the stream.
I mean, I tend to look at that as habitat.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, we're now to the point where you used to be able to. It was wooded between Longfellow and Faulkner Ridge. You can see the houses back to back now. It's
if you're losing property, that's not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to study it.
Yeah, just as a comparison.
It sounds like it's a lot more unstable. It's certainly more unstable than this.
Yeah.
Okay, Keith, and then Sky.
I just wanted to ask, when you talk about the 70% in terms of the trees, is that supposed to be year 1? Is it supposed to be by year 5? What's that metric that we're looking at there in terms of what they've said that we're supposed to have done, and who pays for the trees that we have to replant?
So I'd have to dig into the monitoring report, but I think it was a year three goal, or even the overarching goal. But the target was 75% sort of overall, and I think it was just sort of a year 3 check on where that was, and they had seen loss. I think it was 49% was what the actual survivability was. And so they responded with the tree planting. And so this is part of Ecotone's ongoing 5-year management program. So that was conducted at their expense as part of their requirements to meet these standards. Again, established by the Department of Natural Resources as part of the forest stewardship requirement. So this is all part of the regulatory construct around this program.
And the next thing, piggybacking on what Bill was saying, is there any effort for these areas that are degraded, now that we've been through this whole process of years, is there any effort to standardize and measure, monitor, some of these degraded areas, rather than waiting until we're looking to do something down the road, like where are we now? And it may just be spots throughout, but if there's areas that are degraded, is anything like that happening today?
Yeah, so
like officially, I don't mean like, my neighbor coming through and doing stuff. I mean like
Well, that's part of one of the great things about our Streamliners program that we have running in the community, and it's continuing to grow, where we actually leverage interested volunteers. It's what Sam was talking about, and the MBSS requirements. It's very scientifically rigorous, and it takes time. You have to be well trained to do it. It's something we're continuing to build up capacity within the community to do, and there's lots of great citizen scientists that we've actively engaged with and partnered with HCC on some of these programs, as well as DNR. So we have multiple sites throughout the community that we have been leveraging with our Stream Raiders program to gather this data with our trained community volunteers, so that we can actually see trends over time. Is it as robust and granular as we would have liked? No, but we're doing our best with our Streamliners program to actually get some of that baseline data throughout the community. And then there's other sources that, again, I mentioned the MBSS, the sort of statewide survey, where there are activities underway by DNR and MDE to gather some of this data that they then share broadly.
So then those individuals were not there prior to this restoration, but they are there since then.
So in terms of MDE's water quality sampling, they specifically initiated the sampling.
The training folks, the stream.
Correct. Yeah, correct. We did not do a pre at this location. Sure. Yeah, but it's been a post. We've added it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sky, and then we're going to wrap it up here.
I've heard tonight, and I'm going to throw out two phrases, and it may be you can't have one without the other, but I understand reconnection to the floodplain, and it's very visual in my mind, and I understand why that's good because it slows the flow. But is that a different way of looking at the same situation as stream stabilization? Are they the similar or related or independent of each other? Because Jeremy, you said the primary goal was stream stabilization, and to me, I thought it was reconnection to the floodplain. But
sure, that's a great question, by the way. Yeah. So they're not exactly the same. So the one's a means to the end. So when you reconnect a stream to the floodplain, you inherently stabilize it because you spread out the flow area. So if you have the same queue, so just a note, I was a water quality engineer at Villanova for a couple of years. So I know exactly what's happening in these streams. So this is sort of part of my jam. So when you widen the area, you have the same queue, the flow volume. So the velocity goes down, right? If you're moving the same amount through a wider area, you slow it down. So you reduce the velocity of the water moving through the stream because it's into the floodplain, and therefore you reduce its erosive force. So that provides a stabilization effect. Concurrently with this project, we have very intentionally stabilized the stream with vegetation, different types of measures around encouraging plant growth along the banks of the base flow of the stream, which also stabilizes the stream banks and reduces erosion. So it's approached through multiple angles. They're not the same, but reconnecting the stream to the floodplain provides a stabilization benefit, and there's other measures that also stabilize the stream. That answers it.
All right. Just want to make sure I understand. So this Longfellow Stream Restoration Project, was the State Highway Administration project, which had a set of criteria, which were then validated by the various state and federal agencies. And the checking on says that those criteria have been met. Now, it's not all the criteria we would prefer, but it was the criteria set out at the beginning of the project, right?
Correct.
All right, good, thank you.
Whoa, that's,
Could just say
that was wrong, because we're in the middle of planting 700 trees, so we're not there yet.
Oh, no,
But you can't, so you can't say that it's been a success based upon the requirement.
You've only got a 36%.
We got 2 more years. We got 2 more years.
Meeting the
Under current state, it is meeting this, it is
Yes,
successfully
it is
meeting the
meeting the
requirements.
So I think part of the challenge here, and that's the reason why I was asking some really specific questions, is we're making some broad statements about success and not success. And based upon what I've learned here today, there isn't 100% success or 100% not success, because there's work that has to be done and monitored and measured and constantly measured. We're in this category of saying, was it successful or was it not? And that's
wrong question.
Completing the project is not success.
Right, so I
Completing the
just want to make
project and
sure.
getting your permits is not success.
And I apologize to interrupt that, but that's, I think, what drives me a little bit crazy about the back and forth conversation sometimes, is it's so black and white, and this really isn't that issue. Sam, you talked about, we have multiple methods that we need to go about to attack the problem. And I think that's where we're getting, kind of hung up, is that, everybody, we're successful. And then it's like, well, wait a second, we just planted trees, and it just doesn't make sense or compute, because the requirement was to have all these trees out there. And if they're not there, they're not there. So that, we're not successful that way. So I wouldn't use the word success. I would use are we managing it? Are we moving in the direction that we need to be moving? And then are we measuring the movement that we're making? And are we keeping people accountable for that? And how long can we keep people accountable for that, for that continued development? So I think that made me a little bit nervous when you said, so we had success, and you said we had success, and I'm like, whoa.
Well, we successfully met the regulatory objectives, was my response. The broader, from a watershed
trees
perspective.
weren't part of the regulatory objectives.
Well, no, they are, but the 5 years of monitoring is part of the project. And so,
I understand, but I'm trying to be really, really careful, because this is where we get into these debates. If the guidelines said that we were supposed to stabilize the streams and put 70% of the trees or whatever back in there, and we're not at 70% of the trees, we haven't met the objectives, is the way that I understand that. And I'm a layman here. I'm just trying to understand what everyone's telling me, but if we haven't gotten all those boxes checked, is the way that I look at it, that means we haven't gotten there yet, right?
well, it's known that tree survivability rate is low anywhere. It's hard to have trees survive. We plant trees all day long in our open space, and a lot of them just die. Like, it's just the way it goes for lots of reasons. And so that's the purpose of the 5-year monitoring program. So honestly, as I was coming over here this evening, I view the erosion that's been discovered in the project site as a success. From my perspective as an engineer responsible for this project, in a way, because one's in my backyard, and two, I work for the organization that supported it. If that hadn't happened within our 5-year window, if we didn't have the storms that created those conditions to identify those defects in the flow pattern, to identify the hydraulic issues that were not anticipated through the numerous engineering reviews of this project, because real life is different than a computer simulation, I view that as a success. I view the replanting as a success. It's an example of it working. Yeah. The program is working. The monitoring component is being successful in lifting the project up to meet the objectives.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure. Carrie?
So all through this, Jeremy, you've been referencing the regulatory agencies. Who put the 75% benchmark into the requirements? Wasn't it one of the regulatory agencies? Why would they give us a benchmark that was unachievable? And if the monitoring is incredibly important, because it's not succeeding, we're not meeting the benchmarks as expected. So we can't keep saying this is a success. If at the 3-year mark, you were supposed to have 75% survivability, that was supposed to be achievable. They wouldn't say, we're going to give them 75% and we know that's not going to work. That's not how they work, right? They want to give you something that's achievable. And you're now saying, oh, well, trees die. That just seems like, where are you pulling that out of? Like, why can't you meet that 75%?
They are meeting the 75%.
You're not. You're 36%. That's what they just said. They told you your 36% survivability rate. When you look at Sam's report for the invasive species, the amount of cover of invasive species is huge. You're saying, oh, it's failing. The places are failing. I'm so glad they're monitoring because we're seeing these things that are failing. But those are the things that the people who don't believe in stream restoration have been saying all along, that these are the things that are going to happen. So I agree with Keith. I don't think you can say it's a success. You might not be able to say it's a complete failure. Maybe you can overcome this. I have my serious doubts, but I'm with Keith on this. I don't think we should ever be calling this a success unless we're meeting the benchmarks that we keep touting.
But
I was a little softer than that. I just wanted, because the success word bugs me, right?
Yes.
Because this isn't we got there or not. This is, we're trying to manage this thing, and the big thing for me is that we have to continue to manage and understand and make adjustments and, continue to transition. And so when I heard that success, and we're all off and running, I was like, wait a second, let's not run away with ourselves yet. We're making progress toward the goal, and we have to continue down that path. That's all I was saying. And
no, I get that, Keith. My upset was with Jeremy for saying, oh, well, trees die, and when clearly the benchmark was given to you by the regulatory agencies that you keep referencing to say this is why we did this project, but then you can't even meet the benchmark that the regulatory agency gave us. That's the part I was struggling with.
It's a dynamic, natural system. Trees do just die. They do. And I can guarantee you, if you ask a forester with DNR, would they have actually expected 75% of those trees that we first put in 3 years ago to live? They would say, of course not. They would say some of them are going to die, a lot of them.
Then why did they give us that benchmark?
Because that's the standard you meet over time, and that's the intent to replant. That's how it works. That's why it's there. That's why it's part of the 5-year monitoring program. No one would expect 3 out of 4 trees to live we can't achieve that level of success in open space. And we do a really great job at planting trees the way you need to plant them. Trees just die. And there's 10 times the deer population in this town than it can sustain. So I would not underestimate any of those external environmental factors associated with the success rate, totally independent of this project, period. And that's the nature of the monitoring program. And that's why it's successful, is because things are going to not work out the way intended. Again, because a hydrologic simulation, trees die because of external factors, you never know. But you have the standard to go back and follow on and replant to meet the standards over time. That's the intent. And that's why it's successful.
Alan.
Well, so then 76% of what? You said that's the standard to reach over time. 76% of what?
Of the original tree planting as part of the project. Again, I don't set the requirements. So this is the forestry standards established by the Department of Natural Resources.
Understand what it is. So what you're saying is that if 100 trees got planted on day 1, that by end of year 5, there ought to be 76 trees there, at least.
That is the standard established by the Department of Natural Resources for forestry, yes, for these types of projects.
And given that only 36% of the trees that were originally planted died, and given that X hundred trees were planted, do you have any sense of where we are right now? Even if we assume, either if we assume that all the new trees that got planted are going to live, or if we assume that only 36% of them are going to live?
I think we're currently at 108% of the standard.
Dennis had a question.
So if I could close this out, which is my desperate hope, is to say that it's not a success and it's not a failure. It's somewhere in between, and there's a lot of work yet to be done. But the strong language that we hear about failure is just simply not true. And the strong language saying it's a success is not true at this moment either. It's a multi-generational project that's going to take time. And to sit here and think we can solve it in a couple of years, it didn't happen in a couple of years. We're 58 years old, however old CA is. So this is going to take some time. It's not a success, it's not a failure, it's in the middle. There's work to be done, which will get done.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Sam.
So we can see each other.
I think Eric had his hand up.
Oh, Eric? Real quick.
Yeah, so I know we've been talking about quantitative metrics, and I usually like to talk about numbers, but this is one of those cases where I think a qualitative question might come in handy. So I've seen before pictures, I've toured this site, seen the after state. Clearly, we haven't hit success. The question I have long-term is, how long will it take for this area to fully heal? That, I think, is the key question. And will it fully heal?
Dennis?
So I would say that's an impossible question to answer because there's so many factors that weigh into that. But I can tell you that there are parts of the Owen Brown reaches that are abject failures, and the trees have been decimated by the ash borer insect infestation, and they look a heck of a lot worse than any part of this project. So. Is there going to be another infestation? Is there something else that's going to come along? That's not an easy question to answer. But I can tell you absolutely that there's many other natural areas of the open space that look a heck of a lot worse.
Okay.
Yes, except there's a difference between a natural phenomenon, which we try to prevent, and something that we sort of brought in amongst ourselves, a man-made phenomenon. Those are two different things.
Well, true, although in this case, what we did looks a lot better than what happened in nature.
Okay, let's
the information.
Let's move back on to board votes. But thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate all the information.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to board votes. CA Board of Directors operating procedures for meetings and work sessions. All right, the resolution is, now therefore be resolved that the board.
Presentation, please, so that those of us online can see everybody.
Mic's on.
My mic's on.
No, he's talking about the
He's talking about the presentation that's on the screen.
Okay.
Like, if you look at the side screens, you can tell.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that better, Alan?
Thank you.
Okay, now therefore be resolved that the Board of Directors approves the proposed changes to the Columbia Association Board of Directors operating procedures for meetings and work sessions as contained in the Columbia Association Board of Directors governing documents approved April 27, 2017. And you have a list of all the changes in the document. All right, the chair will move that resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, I'll call the question. No.
Sure.
Sky?
There's an inherent challenge in here in that we delineate when we do not follow Robert's Rules of Order, and that's fine. The board member who first raises his or her hand is called upon in the order of which that happens. I've heard a lot over the past year that that's not working very well because a few people, or depending upon the speaker, when somebody wants to ask a question, they raise their hand in the middle of the question, and that in the middle of the person talking, so they get to ask the question first, or they get to make their comment first. And I think there are more equitable ways of doing it than that. One thing that is incorporated in this is that each member has 2 opportunities to speak, and each time for 3 minutes. So that may make everything more equitable.
Keith, Eric, and Karen?
So Robert's rules, the way that we utilize them, we're not using all of the rules explicitly. We're utilizing them in order to guide meetings. And part of what the chair should and could do is, even if they, in certain circumstances, don't want to go through who's first, who's second, who's third, the idea that Robert's rules talks about is to facilitate conversation. So if there's a point, counterpoint, or other components that need to be clarified, and then the chair decides to move on to another topic, that's another way of effectively managing the flow. But it can't be if Andy gets frustrated and decides he doesn't want to hear about this topic that he moves on. It has to be like a really good management of the flow of the conversation to get to the end. So the idea of having the specific ones like timing us for 3 minutes or 2, and I saw those components, I think we have to really, we've had some really good luck with just conversation facilitation that ended up with a natural end. And I think that's where we need to go with it and just try to manage ourselves that way.
Eric, and then Karen and Bill. And
I just want to point out that although it might seem simple, managing the queue is actually harder than it seems for a couple of reasons. First, trying to keep track of the exact order everybody raises their hand is not easy when you have 10 people where some people are virtual and some people are in person. To get the exact timing right, it's almost impossible. The second thing is the chair also has to manage the percentage of talking. So you wouldn't want someone to raise their hand, have someone else speak, and have that first person raise their hand again and again and again. So you want to basically, the chair has to be able to come up with an equitable way of making sure that everyone has, everyone speaks first and then you come around again. So it's not just who raised their hand first, it's also you got to take into account, well, this person's already talked once or twice and this person hasn't talked at all. So it's a little bit more complicated than it might seem at first. The other thing I'll point out is that there are actually systems that'll keep track of queues, and they're pretty fancy computer systems. They're not cheap, but that is, if the board so wanted to go in that direction, they could.
Karen?
Yeah, I agree with Sky on this one. I sensed her frustration when I was asking my follow-up questions because she wants to get a turn to ask her question, and there's only so much time that we're here unless we stay for 48 hours. And so I've actually thought about this before, is that it would make sense to just go around the room once, go around the room, hit the people who are online, and give everybody an opportunity to talk. You can always pass and come back, yield your time. I actually would give people, it allows for a better conversation too, I think. If you had 3 to 5 minutes, an opportunity to ask your questions, you could have a better conversation with the guest speaker or the expert, whoever we have here that we're talking to. So I actually agree with Sky on that one. I think that would be something that we consider. I don't know if we can vote on that tonight, but something to push to the next board.
Bill?
Karen, thank you for that on-ramp there.
You're welcome.
I think that pretty much everybody who's spoken before me has correctly identified that the administration or the House, and to what extent some Roberts rules and queues and things like that, are all very important things that we need to address in order to hold better meetings. But I believe this motion was focused more on moving to meeting schedules where we have new business and old business in all of our meetings, and we don't have the work sessions as a normal process. And I just want to draw back to that so that we can use our time wisely. I think it's important to discuss the Roberts Rules discussion and the Q discussion, but I wanted to focus on this particular resolution before us here.
Alan?
Yeah, I agree with what Bill just said. I actually liked Karen's back and forth. I think to limit ourselves to one statement and just go around, often it's with each other that we need to have the conversation. I very much agree with Keith that it's about facilitating conversation, and each person scattershot saying their piece is not conversation. That's a series of monologues. So I think having in our back pocket something like, hey, you've already spoken twice, you've got to wait till other people have spoken, as a way for the chair to be able to control things if necessary, may make sense. But I wouldn't want to see us doing that as part of our normal procedure. Because I think the more organic conversation is what we really need to have. I would also point out that there's nothing that says the chair has to be the one to keep track of the queue. That could be the vice chair. It could be somebody else. I mean, we already have a practice where we have a timekeeper. Best meeting practice says divvy up the jobs, have different people do different pieces of it, and keeping track of the queue would be one of those. Could be.
Okay. I'll just say, I'll put myself in the queue here real quick. I mean, I think it's a very good point. Probably needs a lot more discussion. And I will say that various boards have done it in various ways over the years. And it really kind of depends on the board and on the chair and however the board wants to run. So, but it's great discussion. I think you need to take that up with the new board.
That feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, I think the new board should handle that. All right, I'm going to call the question here. Is there any opposition, or should I take a voice vote? Any opposition? All right, unanimous. Okay, the next one is propose a new strategic plan. And let's introduce the resolution and then turn it over to Dennis for. So the resolution is, therefore be resolved that the Board of Directors recognizes the work done by the consultant and accepts its submission of the Columbia Association Strategic Plan 2024-2029 for further consideration by the fiscal year 2025 CA Board of Directors, if that board so chooses. I will make that recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Dennis.
So I've said this before. I think this is something the board can table, accept, use as an interim solution until they have the new board has time to meet on May 18th. It's a great starting point. A lot of community input went into this, and in broad terms, I think a lot of this is exactly what needs to be done, whether it's worded exactly the way some people feel it should be. But there'll be more discussion on the 18th. There's a new board coming in. And I think that's, we're not going to revisit, we're not going to rewrite it tonight. And I'd say, from my perspective, I would use it as an interim solution pending that meeting on May 18th.
And we have our consultant.
Okay. Deep is actually online, and she wanted to say a couple things.
I'm sorry,
She's
I missed
remote today.
Deepa?
Thank you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, and thank you again for the opportunity to present real quick. As a reminder, this has been an intensive and inclusive, 6-month process to develop a plan with specific goals and objectives. Our intent is for it to serve as a roadmap, not just for the SLT and the board, but also for the new CEO who's just coming in. In terms of looking at where we go from here, the plan is structured to be, it's a 5-year comprehensive plan strategic plan going on till 2029, but the recommendation is to revisit all of the goals and objectives at least once a year to make any tweaks based on circumstances that occur. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael to sort of give the board an update of where things stand since our last meeting.
Yes, so thank you. Thanks, Deepa, and thanks, everyone. So we've appreciated the opportunity to work with you. Just wanted to let you know that we've, based on the last 2 work sessions that we had, the last 2 and 4 weeks ago, we did make a number of changes that were responsive to the discussion and the comments. So we added a section that talks about Columbia community of many focused on residents, that attempted to kind of define the different groups that we've talked about and emphasize the importance of that in the plan. we did move up the section about how the strategic plan was created. And if you've looked it through the document, you can see all the kind of front matter in it now. We spent most of our discussion time looking at the strategies and recommendations and objectives, but obviously the front matter is important as well as context for it. So we did move that up to kind of emphasize the importance of that. We did meet with Armsby to look at the language for the goal on technology leverages innovative and advanced solutions to support CA's growth. So that was based on his review and comments. And then, I don't know if you all received it, but we did go through the whole document again to just look at where residents were referenced and where community was referenced to kind of clarify that. And I think there's maybe 7 or 8 changes that were made to emphasize the residents part, in addition to what I said earlier, which was adding some explanation about the different stakeholders. So that's the document that you have in front of you tonight.
Any questions, any discussion? Karen?
Does somebody have to make a motion for what Dennis suggested? Or, I mean, Dennis is ex officio, but he can make motions, can't he?
Well, we actually have a motion on if which I kind of thought was, yeah, what?
Okay.
The resolution was written by staff, so. Any other discussions?
Yes.
Wait, Eric and then Keith.
Yes, I'd like to move to table the motion.
All right.
Second.
Give me a second, just a second. Okay, we have a motion to table. Keith, were you going to talk about that, or?
I'm prepared to if we're opening that part of you. I just don't understand why we're tabling, saying that we've accepted a really decent work product over a 6-month process that is going to be further considered by the board of directors. We're not adopting a strategic plan. We're accepting the work that's been done as I'm understanding this to be used. Am I misinterpreting that?
No, that's
okay. I just wanted to understand why we would table, saying that we are tabling it is really what's going on.
Eric, any response?
I'm a bit confused. I assume this vote was to adopt the strategic plan, so I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
It's not how it reads in the packet.
It says recognizes the work done by the consultant, accepts its submission for further consideration by the fiscal year 2025 CA Board of Directors, if that board so chooses. You know,
I don't like what I said.
we can't make the new board do anything yet.
So this doesn't adopt this doesn't adopt the strategic plan.
No, it accepts all the work and accepts its submission and sends it on to the next board.
So that's essentially the same thing as tabling it, except we have a resolution. So I'm still a little confused what the resolution does.
Keith.
So I think the resolution formally acknowledges the process that we've gone through. It acknowledges the work of the consultants and the many stakeholders that have gone through. And I think it's appropriate to pass something like this instead of just tabling it all together, because it just talks about, we invested a lot of time and effort into this thing, and we should acknowledge that. And frankly, I think as much as I'm not satisfied with where we ended up, I'm really satisfied with the work that went into getting us at least to this point. It's just a matter of, whose opinion is it that it's across the finish line, in a lot of ways. So that's the reason why I would go for the resolution, is just to, I don't know, it seems procedural to just do that. We can do this and just move on.
So I guess the question I have is there anything in this resolution that would adopt the strategic plan by default if the next board decides to just ignore it or take up something else? That's why I'm a little confused.
No, there's nothing in there. That's my legal interpretation. Sorry, John.
I'll refer the question to Andy.
Our general counsel said that was spot on. So.
Can I ask my question now?
Well, we had the motion to table, so we're going to have to take
I
a vote.
understand that. I
sure.
want to comment.
Okay.
It's my understanding that this could be considered an interim strategic plan or a 5-year strategic plan, depending upon what the next board chooses to do. They can relook and revise it and start all over again, or they can accept it.
Right, it's up to the new board. The new board can choose whatever they wish to do.
That's what
I'll withdraw my motion to table.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the question.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the resolution? Hearing none, resolution is adopted. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the work done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of good
It's been a
information.
pleasure working with you.
All right, easement policy. I know it's going to be an interesting discussion, so we'll start off with this. Okay, so the resolution I have before me is, now therefore it be resolved that the SIA Board of Directors, in light of its review and recent process enhancements described therein, reaffirms that the procedures on transaction of CA real property remains in full force and effect. So as chair, I will move that. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, let's go to discussion. Karen? Yes.
Okay, I want to offer an amendment to the existing easement policy. I want
By
to
the
make
way,
a,
we all have them in writing.
what's that?
We have it in writing.
We have it in writing.
Yes.
So the first motion is to replace section B2 of the existing easement policy with the following text. CA shall obtain an independent professional evaluation of the request and an independent professional appraisal of the value of the property that is the subject of the transaction.
Wait, okay, that's an amendment.
Yeah,
I'll second the amendment.
thank you.
Great. Okay, that was Karen and Eric. Discussion, Bill, and then Sky.
Just for clarity, I'd like to read what the current language in B2 is for everybody who's listening along. Current language says, CA shall obtain a professional appraisal of the value of the property that is the subject of the transaction if deemed necessary. So just want to make sure we had both of those read in.
Sky.
It's moot. It was not clear where B2 was, but now it is.
Okay.
Alan.
Alan and then Eric?
Yeah, Karen, are you contemplating that this, two questions, I think. Are you contemplating this would apply to every single easement request of whatever type, anytime?
Yes, unless the board chooses not to. The board can waive anything at any time.
Sure.
But for all intents and purposes, right now, the default position is to not ask for it. So I think that the default position should be we want it unless the board says differently.
And when it says that we would request it, is it still clear in your mind that, and your intention, that it's the applicant who would pay for it?
Yes.
Okay, Eric and Bill? Eric?
Sorry. So the current policy says if deemed necessary, and this has the same concern I had with the tot lot policy, where if deemed necessary, it doesn't say who gets to do the deeming, who deems it necessary. It's just it's vague, and I think Karen's amendment makes it very clear now that this is necessary. So I support this.
Bill?
Two quick points. To Karen's point that the board can waive any policy at any time, speaks to that there are no policies. We should have policies and we should follow our policies. That should be the normal course of business. To just waive them as a matter of convenience is not a good way to run a board or a corporation. With respect to the language, I am a little... I'd like a little bit more information on the difference between an independent professional evaluation and an independent professional appraisal, as both are included in the motion. And I would just like to know what the discerning difference is. Are they two separate actions done by two separate contractors? Are they one single thing? Or is it redundant? I'm not sure what the language is really trying to reflect there.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, it depends. It depends, right? So it could be the same person doing it, but the evaluation would be an evaluation, say, of the contract, right? What's in the contract? Is it all the things that I had put in that policy that I wrote, making sure that the benefits that are being promised can be realized? I mean, we just went through the whole thing with stream restoration. Like, I think we all know from all the expertise that we've heard over the past 12, 15, 18 months that if you had talked to Margaret Palmer, and she's just one expert on stream restoration, she is a leader in her field, you would understand that that stream restoration was never going to be possible. I actually think had we had somebody in here to evaluate IAT, all the promises that were made about IAT, we might not have granted that easement either, because I think an independent evaluation would have realized that you weren't going to achieve the goals that were being promised. So that's what I'm talking about in evaluation. I want to know that CA is, when we're entering into any kind of agreement with anyone, that we're minimizing the amount of risk that we're taking.
Keith, and then
I like the idea of adding the language about the professional evaluation, but I also would want to have if deemed necessary. I think positionally, the reason why I like having it in there is because it's a reminder to the board, and if we're bringing this if this policy is coming with each easement requests, it's in there. So someone can now say, in a future board, did we get a professional evaluation and, why not, or something along those lines, right? It wasn't in there before, so it wasn't something to ask. I would still like to have if deemed necessary, because I think that our professional staff should have the ability to interpret what they need to interpret. We've got professionals, so.
Sky.
Yeah, as the policy stands, the if necessary, that's a judgment call on the part of the CA staff. And they would put together this whole 4-page packet to give to the board to make a final decision, and the board could at that point, again, ask for more information. So I think it's all in here as it is.
Dennis wants to respond.
Actually, Sky said everything I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say, so. The board has always had the authority.
Great mind thinks alike.
Eric, and then I want to put myself in the queue. Eric?
Keith had his hand up also.
They were before me, I think.
Yeah, I just want to ask Keith, so if you want to add the words if deemed necessary, I'd like you to specify who's doing the deeming, who's making that decision, and that should be part of the same text if we're going to have those words. Because right now, if we just have words if deemed necessary and we don't specify who, it's unclear and it can become contentious.
Yeah.
Keith, do you want to respond to Eric's question?
Not a question. I guess I'll just put a motion to amend and you can accept it or not, or friendly or whatever, is to add if deemed necessary by professional staff. That's what I would. That's what my amendment would be.
I don't know that I accept it, because I really want the board to be the ones making the decision. It's a board policy, right. And so I understand where you're struggling with that, but the liability is on the board. The decision-making is on the board. So if we rely on staff and they come to us and say, oh, you don't need to do this, don't worry about it, I worry that we did need to worry about it, and what is the professional expertise that we're actually getting? Because we know from, and I'm sorry to keep using this one as the example, but we know that in stream restoration, we were told we don't have experts when it came to stream restoration. We were told the two people that were the experts were not actually experts in what we were talking about. So how do we know when the staff has the expertise and when they don't?
Yeah. So the only counter I'd like to make to that is that the board has responsibility for everything that happens in CA, like literally everything. If someone trips on a sidewalk, ultimately, in theory, we're responsible for that. So I don't know that that's the argument to say that we need to add something in here. I think we just, I like the idea of having checklists, because when you have a checklist that's on top of a set of documents, it triggers you to think about certain things, right? And I'd prefer to have that type of thing on there so that we can ask staff, well, why didn't you get a professional appraisal, or why didn't you do X, Y, Z? Right now, what we're requiring is that the board, who are not experts, needs to know, oh, we need a professional, independent, appraisal. And I like the idea of having it written in here so I can look at this sucker and say, well, maybe I should ask why not have a professional appraisal, evaluation and appraisal. So I like having it in there, but I like saying if deemed necessary by professional staff. I understand if you don't accept it.
If you want to put if deemed necessary in there, I'll accept that part, but how do you account for if staff doesn't have the expertise?
Okay, I put myself in.
Go ahead.
Andy?
Yeah.
Just for the purpose of discussion, I will second the amendment to the amendment so we can further discuss.
Okay, that's the reason why we can't have a conversation.
Yeah, all right, so, wait a minute.
We've kept it straight.
Keith, Bill, add the words if deemed
Necessary.
By staff, by,
You know what, I'm fine with if deemed necessary, frankly. That's easy enough because the board either votes or the staff brings it. Anyone can make a decision at that point.
Okay, I accept that.
okay. Okay, so first, so my concern is if we put this amendment in as it's written, even with the change, staff is on the hook to always do this because the board can't make a decision until staff has already processed and brought the easement request forward to us. So if suddenly what the policy says is CA shall obtain an independent professional evaluation, the question comes is if deemed necessary by who, because the board doesn't see it until it's been initially processed by the staff. So the staff is either going to have to decide they need it according to the policy all the time for every transaction, because the board's not going to be able to tell staff, I want it for this property, but not for that property, because it's going to happen before it gets to the board. So I worry about that. That's, and I'll tell you from a staff point of view, from an organization, staff would say, well, what do? Do I get the assessment all the time?
Can I rebut to that?
Sure.
Alan, I know that other people had their hand up. I think quite simply, professional staff is going to make a decision if it's necessary when they're reviewing it to bring it to us. If the board feels that we all feel it's necessary, then we can also push it back at that point. So it doesn't require anyone to do anything. It's the ability to make a decision at the time.
Okay, now I have Eric, Alan, and Sky.
So I'll make a friendly amendment to reword it to say, if deemed necessary by either the president or the board of directors. To say professional staff is still too vague because it doesn't identify who. So we need to be very clear who gets to do the deeming, which specific positions. So I would make a friendly amendment to say, if deemed necessary by either the CA president or the board of directors.
I think that's fine. I agree with that because then the staff, the president is staff.
Say that again? By the president or?
I said I accept that because the president, you were asking what the wording was.
Yeah, so of the president or the board of directors?
Yeah.
Yes.
Man. Are we, you seconded it, you said? Or accepted it?
I accept that.
So okay, I'm not even going to go into the amendment stuff. Can I comment then?
Yes.
Oh, Alan has his hand up, I'm sorry.
Alan and then
Sky.
And Sky, and then I have you down.
That's fine.
Alan?
You're on mute.
The thing I'm still trying to understand is we're not actually, if I understand this, it's not actually asking the staff to do anything except let whatever on-call consultant we have who does this to say, you need to, here's the request, do an evaluation. So it's not really burdening the staff, if I'm
No.
understanding this correctly, with extra to do. What we're burdening is the applicant to pay, and I have no idea how much these things would cost, to make this happen. I just want to make sure I'm correct about all that.
John, I think our general counsel wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I know this has been talked about before, but, I mean, this is not defined as an independent professional evaluation.
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
You might have to move.
There's nothing in there that says that the applicant has to pay for it. There's nothing that says how they're selected. I think if you're going to put this out to the business community, development community, BG&E, whoever, they need notice that they have to pay for it. And it's not good just to say, well, we talked about it before and they have to pay for it. If that's what you want, I think that should be written in the policy. This is just so vague and non-specific, it doesn't put the applicant on notice of what they're obligated to do. It also doesn't put the staff on notice of how are they supposed to be selected? We have to go through a competitive bidding process. This is so vague that it would be difficult to implement. So I think you need more specifics, as this is the direction you want to take as to what a professional evaluation is, who pays for it, how they're selected. It's very unclear, and I think it would be subject to challenge.
I thought we were told at the last meeting, when we talked about this, that the standard practice is the applicant pays for these things.
Well, that's great to say it, but it's not in your policy. So, you know, we could say a lot of things, but that doesn't mean it's part of the policy.
Great.
Okay, Sky and then Dennis, and then Keith and then Dennis.
It's a two-step process, and the procedure is the same in both steps. It's only the people, the decision makers that differ. Step one is the staff who researches it, investigates it, looks into it, makes a decision, which is called a recommendation. Then it is given over to the board, who investigates it, researches by reading the materials and thinking about them and maybe making a site visit. And then the board makes a decision. At both places, it's up to an adult to understand when, to know what you don't know and to ask those questions. If you have to ask them of an outside consultant, so be it. But I think it's all written in here and it's understood. What was the wording? If necessary, with the exception of what John said about defining whatever you said.
Keith and then Dennis.
Yeah, trying to see if it's worthwhile. The whole president thing is adding that instead of professional staff to be honest with you, it's a little bit of a joke, because all the president has to do is say that he's delegating to his staff, and then, you know, we're off and running. So what it seems like we're trying to do here is to just, you know, dig and dig and dig and dig in order to lock down a scenario, and I'm just uncomfortable with that. So that's I don't like the adding the president piece and all those pieces. It's just if deemed necessary. So at any stage, anyone can look at this thing and say that we want to deem it necessary. And I hear what John is saying. You know, I don't know how to address that aspect of it, but I accept that feedback.
All right, Dennis.
At the risk of being redundant, I agree with what Sky says and Keith. I mean, it's not necessary.
Karen.
Yeah, I just want to respond to John. I just think that we don't tell, the policy right now doesn't tell the applicant that they have to pay. But we know that when you're on the site, when you go onto the website, all the information is right there telling the applicant, you have to pay for this. There's a charge associated with it. We've never had it in the policy saying who's going to pay. So I don't know that what we're trying to do now changes their understanding. It may cost slightly more depending on the size of the application, what it involves, but I don't see this adding any extra burden. And also, the fact of the matter is we already know that there are companies who have contractors on call, and I know, Bob Dover was one of them who worked alongside the Bureau of Land Management and did exactly that, to evaluate these projects for the Bureau of Land Management to make sure that they were getting what was being promised was actually achievable. So I'm not really concerned about that part. I hate to keep going back and forth on this, but if deemed necessary, if that's the only language we want in there, I can live with that.
All right, Bill and Eric.
I'm trying to grapple with I understand that you're concerned about stormwater and.
It's more than that, Bill.
Well, it's a lot more than that. It's the 600 easements that we had where there wasn't really any real controversy. And if we have somebody on retainer and we give them 600 applications and they are perfunctory stormwater or sewer hookup, a school system needs expansion of a parking lot, and what are we getting for paying that retainer for that one? It seems that the if deemed necessary would allow for, hey, this is the one where we need extra help.
I hate to interrupt you, but I think everybody.
No, you should let me finish. You should not interrupt me.
No, I do want to interrupt you.
No, I don't think that's the right thing to do with a board meeting.
Yes, it is absolutely, because you're applying what I'm saying to the entire policy, and I'm only talking about section B. And you guys are talking about sewer and all that kind of stuff, and that's in section A.
Let's let Bill finish. So he has the floor, and then I'll.
So I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I don't think you guys are reading the entire policy.
I didn't interrupt you the entire evening.
I appreciate that. It was a nice change, but I just wanted to get.
Bill, I don't interrupt
understood.
people as cause. It seems that you do. So let's just stop, all right?
Just tonight.
Come on, let's kind of just take a minute here.
Okay.
All right, Bill, you have the floor.
I just want to say once again, in the universe of easements that we have, there are a few that have been controversial, and I think that if deemed necessary, further evaluation seems appropriate. But to say that we're going to keep people on retainer and have them review easement after easement after easement where they are very perfunctory, I don't know if that's a wise investment of corporation dollars.
All right, Eric, and then Karen, and then Dennis.
Yeah, so I just want to point out to Keith that, if we leave it vague and just say if deemed necessary, could an individual board member deem it necessary? Could the chair deem it necessary? Could the audit committee deem it necessary? I think if we aren't specific of who gets to make the decision, we wind up in trouble later on. I think it's better to be as specific as possible now. And also keep in mind, when we're directing staff, we're really directing the president. The president reports directly to the board. So generally speaking, we should be directing the president. So I think it's reasonable to say if deemed necessary by the president or the board of directors. That's my take on it.
Can I respond quickly to that?
Very quickly.
I will say my common statement that there's a lot less directing that we should be doing. There's a lot more general policy that we should be administering. So it drives me crazy that we're trying to get it so specific. But I'll leave it alone.
Karen, and then Dennis.
Yeah, several people have made comments about the state of Maryland and sewer and all that kind of stuff, and that's why, and that was how you started your statement, Bill, and that's why I wanted to make sure people understood when you're commenting. My amendment only, my motion to change it only applies to section B. It doesn't apply to section A, which is state of Maryland, Howard County, and agencies and subdivisions. So we're talking about B, G, and E, and all these other things that people are bringing in. That doesn't apply to them. It's only for section B that I'm asking for this amendment. So I think, and I'm sorry to use this phrase, I think people are getting carried away and not paying attention and not focusing on what's actually being asked for here. So That was, I just want to make sure that everybody understood that. And then the other thing is, you don't hold these people on retainer. You don't pay anything until you actually need the service. That's when you use it. So there would be no CA dollars expended at all to have these independent evaluations until you actually needed them, and then it would be at the cost of the applicant. So it wouldn't be a financial burden to CA to do these independent evaluations.
So a couple things. One, is it good policy to exempt the county, the state, and BG&E? I don't know how much thought went into that conversation, because we haven't talked about it internally, because it might not be good policy. The other is that the reason there is a form on the internet is because you created a policy which then staff was directed to do something with. And that's a great form that's recent. But I agree with Keith. Don't nitpick everything. Create a broad policy. We'll bring information back to you. We cannot approve an easement. The easement has to be approved by the board, the full board, and I trust the board to make the right decision. If we bring something to you and you go, you guys are nuts, we need an appraisal, we'll take it back. And we'll let the applicant know. But to make that an absolute certainty for everything, or not in some cases, is a bad decision, is bad policy.
All right, Keith.
Alan had his hand up.
Oh, Alan, sorry. Alan?
I'd just like to understand, Karen, I don't have the full policy in front of me. You said what A refers to, so what does B encompass?
So A is transactions of real property with 1, the state of Maryland, 2, Howard County, 3, any agency, subdivision, authority, or instrumentality of the state or county or any civic or other nonprofit organization. That's A. Section B is transactions of property and or assets to any entity other than the ones described in Section A above.
Okay, thank you.
Karen, I'd point out that BG&E would follow under B.
We have I mean, the thing, I don't understand why BG&E would come up when we have, what is it?
Well, but
a perpetual easement with
BG&E or Comcast or Verizon, any of those that do infrastructure type services would fall under B. All right.
I had my hand up.
Keith was first.
So I just want to point out, I think all these debates that are happening, we're all saying the same thing, because what's on the table is adding a word or a couple of words that say that, this is another thing that we may request if necessary. And we're debating something that isn't, that everyone agrees on. We're staking positions. This almost feels like the success conversation that we had before. We're staking positions, and we really can't stake positions. We have to just kind of move this thing forward. So I think we should seriously contemplate that as we're going through all of these conversations and facilitating the conversation also, just to make sure that we're not restating the same things over and over.
Bill.
What Keith said.
Okay. All right, let's take a vote on the amendment. Now, as I have the amendment, what it says is replace section B2 with the following. CA shall obtain an independent professional evaluation of the request and an independent professional appraisal of the value of the property that is subject of the transaction if deemed necessary by either the CA president or the CA board of directors. That's what you had accepted. So that's what the amendment is. All right. Everybody understand the amendment? I'll do a roll call vote on this one. Alan.
Call on me later.
I'll go first.
Okay. Keith.
No.
Karen.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Bill.
No.
Sky.
No.
Alan. I'm missing somebody.
Abstain.
Oh, abstain. Me, I vote no. Okay, so the amendment fails 2-4-1. Okay, Karen has a second amendment.
This one will be less fun. Hopefully it'll just be easy. I want to add a section A4 and a B4 to the the existing policy with the following text. This does not exist yet. All lien payers and residents adjacent to the proposed transaction shall be notified by the Columbia Association via the appropriate village boards and individually by mail prior to the CA board approval.
I'll second it to go conversation.
Okay, just a second. Give me 1 minute here. Okay, any discussion? I see Keith and then Bill.
Ellen also.
Oh, Alan, sorry, Alan.
The, with the number of, we're always kind of talking about budgets, because I like this, generally. We're always talking about budgets, but when I hear a number like 600, I don't know if that's actually the number or not, but there's a cost associated with the communication, and I don't know how big that gets. That's my only concern about, putting it in, for instance, in Section A, where we have all of these things that are, and actually, you know what, that could be the same problem, because, Bob Dover said here that the state of Maryland or whoever was in his backyard, digging around. I just worry about cost, and I'm not saying it's going to be this thing that's going to break the bank for us, but I think we need to understand what that's going to look like.
Bill and then Alan?
Really, the only real language I have is we're directing village boards to notify people. I think we have to notify the village board and residents.
Yeah.
But it's difficult for us to say that the village board has notified everybody appropriately. We have to say we notified the village board.
Alan and then Eric?
Yeah, two things. One is a little slightly different take on what you just said, Bill, but if we are saying that by notifying the village board, that satisfies the requirement to notify the people that you're talking about, that would not necessarily get those people notified, because the village board may or may not act. I'm wondering why not frame it as requiring the applicant to make those notifications. And I think that's what's done at the county level, that it's up to the applicant to make those notifications. Do the door hanging and whatever.
Eric?
Yeah, I'd like to see some guarantee that everyone that's adjacent to such a property subject to easement gets a physical notification. And even if that's from CA, and yes, it has a cost, but this is why we pay CA the annual charges. So we have an organization that can provide us that kind of information.
Sky?
Policy would state that residents should be notified. The details of how that notification is done would be up to the staff. So I think by specifying how that should be done, I don't think that's under the auspices of the board, but as a staff function.
Keith?
I think I disagree a little bit with that in the sense that we have to make, I really like the idea that the board is requiring some physical communication to the residents that are impacted by the thing that's going on. So, it's commonly said in a lot of places that you have to individually by mail or certified mail or whatever the case may be, or door hangers. So I don't have a concern there. And then the second piece that I was going to say is there any language, Bill, that you wanted to adjust here to change the whole village board piece, like make an amendment? And you don't have to do it right now, but just think on that in terms of a friendly or whatever we want to do.
All right, I would say that I have to agree with Bill. I don't exactly, we're not going to be able to tell the village boards what to do. I mean, it's just not going to happen. We can inform the village boards, but I think outside of that, I think we're really exceeding our authority if we demand that they inform their residents. It's, we will give them the information, but it's up to each village board how they want to handle it.
May I suggest taking appropriate village boards and putting it in after all and at the beginning of the motion? So it'd be all appropriate village boards, residents and lien payers, and then the rest of the sentence?
So, I mean, normally I am advocating only for lien payers, but are we saying if we're going to do something that's next to a property that's not on Columbia Association property, we're not going to tell them?
That's another issue altogether. I was just talking about village boards and putting that before and saying that we're going to notify three parties, appropriate village boards, residents, and lien payers. I'm not changing anything else in your motion there.
So what he's doing is he's basically putting at the very beginning, appropriate village boards,
You're taking out via? Is that what you're taking out?
Yeah, via. The appropriate village boards, comma, all lien payers, and residents adjacent to the proposed transaction. So that's what Bill is proposing. Is that?
I have a question for you. Say it one more time with lien payers, because I think that you're not going to tell every single lien payer in Columbia if you're going to do something right here, and that's what that sounds like, that you're going to tell every single lien payer. That's why I said adjacent properties.
You are adjacent.
I did.
You want me to word by word this?
Let me see if I've got this. So, the appropriate village board and adjacent lien payers and residents adjacent to the proposed transaction shall be notified by the Columbia Association and individually by mail prior to the CA board approval. Is that what you wanted, Bill?
Yes.
Does that?
Yes, that's fine.
All right. So that would go at the beginning, and we take out, via appropriate bill.
Right. Now, if you want to talk about,
sorry, Eric.
Yeah, I'd like to add a friendly amendment to specify that CA residents.
Say that again, Eric?
Yeah.
Add the word Columbia Association before residents.
Read it again, Andy.
Says the appropriate village board and adjacent lien payers and residents adjacent to the proposed transaction shall be notified by the Columbia Association and individually by mail prior to the CA board approval. So I'm not sure.
He's wanting to define the, in front of residents, instead of any resident, they have to be a CA resident, is what he is. I believe that's what you're saying, right, Eric?
Yeah, I'm trying to clarify what resident means.
Well, I think that, so I said this earlier, is that are we not going to notify somebody, if CA is doing work and a non-lien paying resident is adjacent to that work, do we still have a duty to inform them?
It's a good question for the board.
I don't think so. I mean, it would be nice, but I think we're CA and we have a responsibility to CA residents, my opinion.
So do you accept the CA?
Yes.
All right. Alan, and then Eric, is your hand still up?
No.
Alan?
I disagree. I think if we're doing work or somebody's doing work on our land and it's going to impact in whatever way someone who's next door, just because they don't happen to pay us a lien, an assessment, doesn't mean that we don't owe them the courtesy of letting them know that this is going to be happening. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It's our work that's impacting them.
Well, we're remind the board that, we are going to post the property, because that's in the.
Correct.
The procedures that the staff are going to do. So we will post the property. This is in addition to posting the property.
We have a greater duty to the residents.
Yes.
All right. If there's no more discussion, Eric, you have your hand up. Do you?
It should be down.
Okay, now it's down. Thank you.
It should be down. My app doesn't seem to sync with what's going on there.
Okay, so here is the amendment. The appropriate village board and adjacent lien payers and CA residents adjacent to the proposed transaction shall be notified by the Columbia Association and individually by mail prior to the CA board approval.
It may be nitpicking, but do people actually pay liens?
Annual charge.
Annual charge. We'll make it annual charge. And the reason I'm reading all this is because when the poor person who has to take the minutes is going to have to review all this, and they don't have all the. All right, so let me read it again.
Sure. The one thing before you read it,
sure,
and then maybe you have to read it again, is so what this is stating is that they can be communicated the day before a board meeting that this activity is occurring. So if I postmark something this morning on something that we're voting on, that's acceptable.
But because it says prior to the CA board approval.
Right.
I would say that would be something that would be part of that request form. That would, when the date is, and you come into you and you say, look, that's not enough time, we're going to wait a month or something.
How about if we change it to CA board consideration rather than approval? That way, when it enters new business, that's when it has to be done.
The three reading rule, unless we eliminate.
Two readings. We only do two readings now.
Could I ask, just when you say mail, do you mean U.S. mail or it's email? What do you mean by mail? Just
U.S. snail mail. You need a stamp.
Okay, so, and just to clarify further, so if there's a condo development and there's 50 apartments, there would have to be individual letters to each of those residents or each of those apartments. Now, would that include the owners who own the condo and maybe rent it, or the people who are in the condo as renters? And how would we know who to send that to? Because, I mean, people move all the time. Do we send it to occupant? It's an issue with the mail. I'm just trying to get clarification for the staff so that if this passes, they know what your intention
But you guys have a master list of every lien payer, every person who pays an annual charge, right?
We'll know who is the owner, but if the owner has a tenant, we won't know who that tenant is, or even if they have one. The license, there is a license for every rental property. I'm not sure if we have access to that list the county has of every, and so that is a great point. And that's much more complicated. There are a lot of private condos that are rented.
But generally also, we don't have access, even the villages, to the list of who rents an apartment.
Right, but you have the address.
We have the address, but we don't know who.
You have the address of the condo.
Right.
And you have the address of the owner of the condo if they rent it, right? So you have all the information.
Well, but like I have an accessory apartment in my house, so who would know that?
Well, everyone now.
Okay, Sky.
I live in a condo, and I'm also on the condo HOA. We require that all renters or owners who rent out to send the property management company a copy of the lease. It does not happen.
Yeah.
So the only thing you could do would be maybe send 2 letters to every address, one to resident and one to homeowner.
Yeah.
Bill?
That brings up another question. If you have a street that is a majority landlords, and they all live in Ellicott City or Frederick or Austin, Texas, what's the point of sending a letter about an easement to Austin, Texas? I'm not sure.
Wouldn't you want to know if something was happening next to your property, where no matter where you lived? Like, wouldn't you want to maintain the value of that property? I would want to know.
I'm just wondering. It seems that we should be sending, if we're sending notice, we should be sending notice to people who live in the impacted area. That's my point. Sending it to both places seems to be a little bit much.
Keith?
I'm inclined to ask if we can call the question, because I understand the considerations and the details, but it's staying in line with the policy for board and fleshing it out for the professional staff. I think that as long as we state U.S. mail, that, if we wanted to add that in there, then we could figure out all those nuances and then get a communication back to us about what the policy is going to be, so that we can kind of move on. Because what we're talking about here is the intent, right? What we want to do is we want to make sure that people are getting notified when there's work happening next to their property. That's what we want to get done. So if we can just move through this, even if we have to make an amendment to this down the road, but I think the professional staff can go ahead and figure out the details and just let us know what that is.
All right. So I will read back what I have as the amendment. So add a section 4A and 4B with the following text. The appropriate village board and adjacent annual charge payers and CA residents adjacent to the proposed transaction shall be notified by the Columbia Association individually by U.S. mail prior to the CA board approval. That's the amendment we're voting on. Eric?
So and this might help in terms of renters, especially if you have big, massive apartment complexes. If we can just show that it's physically posted in such an apartment complex, would that be good enough? So you're not sending a letter to every single unit, especially when we've got some large apartment complexes, which could be adjacent to numerous easements. Would that be sufficient for renters? Just make sure it's physically posted on site.
Karen and Keith.
I just want to say what Keith said earlier. I think we don't want to solve that problem. We want to let staff solve that problem.
That's what I was going to say, because if we add an amendment to that starts specifying that, I'm just telling you now, you're not going to get my vote on it, because I'm not going to go down that rat hole.
No, I agree, but I'm just nervous that we're already starting to go down that rat hole by specifying U.S. mail. That's my only concern.
All right, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. Alan?
I don't like that non-annual charge payers are not going to be notified, but I will vote yes.
You said
yes.
Yes, okay. Sky?
No.
Keith?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
And I vote no. Passes 4-3-0. All right, I would like to call the motion now on the overall resolution, which we amended with this amendment just recently. Excuse me. Okay, Bill?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Sky?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, so it passes 7-0-0. All right, we are on to reports only. President's report.
It's very colorful.
Dennis, one thing I'd like to say is congratulations to the staff who put on the Diversity Cultural Day on Wednesday at the sports park. It was very nice, and I thought it was well attended, and thank them for it. Anything else?
In the form of a question, Andy.
Yeah. Bill? Sorry, Alan?
No,
Eric?
I just think you got to frame that in the form of a question.
Can you thank the staff for putting on the very nice cultural day? Eric?
No question.
Oh, your hand is up. Sorry. Okay. Report from Inner Arbor Trust, anything? State and local legislation. Update on board actions. Doing well. All right. Propose new topics. There are none because you're going to have a new board.
I actually do have two proposed new topics for the new board.
Wait a second. Dennis first and then
So
Eric.
what I'd like to do is, on behalf of the staff, and I'm sure the board also, is to thank Andy for years and years of service to the community. Andy is one of the longest serving board members, has been on the board for 15 years, 3 terms of office as the co-chair of the board, 6 terms as the chair. He was awarded the 2017 Outstanding Board Member Leadership Award given by the Community Association Institute out of a pool of 150 candidates. As the interim president and CEO, emeritus, it has been there's some people in your life that make a difference, and Andy has made a difference, not only in my life, but in life of everyone in Columbia. The amount of time, because that 15 years doesn't include the number of years that he served on both the Oakland Mills and the Owen Brown, which was 42?
46.
46. So, oh my gosh, I thought I'd been around a long time. But we have a small token of our appreciation, but I would, on behalf of everyone here and not here, I would like to thank you for all the service to the community and all that you've done and all the time that you've given up and your patience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, it's actually going to be tough to leave, but I'm leaving.
You don't have to go far.
No.
We'll
You can have 3 minutes over here.
I'll come back as a resident and harass you guys.
That'd be great. That'll be lovely.
We don't consider harassment.
Called resident speak out.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I would like to add a proposed new policy. I'd like the board to actually consider a policy on policies. Specifically, how's the policy get created, sunsetting, how's it get drafted. So I think we need a policy on that.
All right, I'll put that on the tracking log for the next board.
Yes.
All right. I get one last quick comments. So I got to admit, I really enjoyed the years on the CA board. I've worked with so many great people. I went back, and my first candidate statement said, I have knowledge of county zoning, CA finances, CA village relations, and many issues facing CA. I know how CA works. I will be an active participating representative for Owen Brown. And my focus is basically the environment, open space, fiscal health of CA, redevelopment, relationships of CA and the village and the county. And I think amazingly enough, for 14 years, I've done that. Those have been my focuses, and it's been quite amazing to see all the changes that have occurred. As I mentioned to Jeremy, I was coming on the board when we first started the sustainability program and all the other things. It's funny, I moved to Columbia in 77. I was looking for something to do. And I volunteered at Oakland Mills on a little committee. And then that started it. And then 2 years on Oakland Mills Village Board, moved to Owen Brown in 80, and it's 44 years there. And I ended up on the CA board. And it's like I never expected that that was all going to happen. And I was going to spend 46 years in CA governance. But I want to thank all the CA and village staff members and the board members and committee members that I've worked with over all those years. CA in Columbia would not be a success without the dedication of the CA and the village staff and all the volunteers, especially those who serve on the boards and the committee members. So I want to thank all of you for all of the work that you have done, and I encourage you to continue because I think all of us are helping to work for the good benefit of Columbia. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And I'll end the message. Thank you very much. Here. Thank you, Dennis.